Welcome to the 2016 Brattleboro Town Meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is now 8:30. We have some preliminary matters that we need to attend to first. I'd like to remind members to check in with the attendants who today are seated at the back of the room. And once again, remind everyone that only authorized persons may sit within the roped-in area. Members should have name tags on, and I will remind you to shut off your cell phones. I have consulted with Ms. Fletcher, our assistant town clerk, and she tells me that indeed we do have a quorum with 113 people signed in already. At this point, the chair would call upon Ben Underhill for a brief convocation. He is a long-standing member of this body. He served for 20-odd years. And Ben has served this community in many ways and is currently a member of the Board of Civil Authority, a Justice of the Peace, and on the Recreation and Parks Board for the town. He's a great example of what it is to be an engaged citizen. So with that, I would ask Ben for a very brief convocation.
Thank you. Lauren called me yesterday asking me to do this. My first thought was he wanted me to be on the Finance Committee. And nothing against it, but that's not my cup of tea. But I was very honored that he asked me, and I'm honored to be a town representative in Brattleboro. I've been here for about 30 years, and this is probably the most important civic duty that any of us do. I feel an honor when the residents of the town elect me to this position, and it's not something that I or any of you should ever take for granted. I'd also like to extend my welcome on behalf of this body to all the new town reps here today. You'll see a lot of people like me who've been doing this job for a number of years. We do it because we love the process and out of concern for the community. We need the visions of these new representatives. We need to share your thoughts and ideas with the rest of us, because you're the ones who'll be leading this town for the next 20 to 30 years. We need to foster this in the younger generation. It's not an easy job, but it's a requirement that we all work towards for the greater good. It does take a village to raise a child, and everyone in this town shares in that obligation. Many of us would rather let someone else do this job, but we all know to have a strong democracy, we all have to help and serve. All politics is local. Lyndon Johnson said, people don't come out to vote for a U.S. senator, they come out to vote for the sheriff, or more recently, for the select board member. After 10 hours of counting ballots for the town select board position, we can see our vote and our voices matter. This country is being pulled apart by ordinary citizens who feel that ideology is all that matters between two individuals. We will not all agree with each other today. We will debate, discuss, and contemplate many important issues. But when it's all done, when it's all over, we'll still be friends and neighbors and come together as one because we care about this town where we've chosen to live our lives. Today, we're not here as red or blue, or in my vernacular, Red Sox or Yankee fans. We're here as residents of this town. Let our gathering be a lesson to those in Washington who can't lead the citizenry of this great country because leadership tells them they can't agree with someone across the aisle. There has to be compromise to achieve unity and strength. Let our discourse here today change the vitriol being spewed by candidates running for the most prestigious office in the world. Let the examples we exhibit today be reflected in how these candidates proceed tomorrow. It's not about you or me. It's about Brattleboro, about Vermont, and about the United States. We should never take that for granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. And now I would ask you to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this point, the chair would call on Town Clerk Annette Cappy to read the opening and the closing paragraphs of the warning.
Thank you. Good morning. The legal voters qualified to vote in representative town meeting are hereby notified and warned to meet in the multipurpose room of the Brattleboro Area Middle School on Saturday, the 19th day of March 2016 at 8:30 a.m. to act on the following articles. And there are 30 articles, and they were signed by Selectboard Chair David Gartenstein, David Scholes, Donna Meckamer, Kate O'Connor, and John Allen. Also by the Brattleboro Town School Directors, Jill Stahl-Tyler, Kim Price, David Scholes, Mark Truhan, and Todd Roach.
Thank you, Ms. Cappy. This meeting is being broadcast live on BCTV Channel 10, on Comcast and Southern Vermont Cable, as well as streaming live on BrattleboroTV.org. You can watch the broadcast anytime on Channel 10 over the next 2 weeks, or online at BrattleboroTV.org. Thank you for speaking into the microphone that is provided so that viewers can hear your comments. The meeting is being interpreted excuse me, for the deaf and hard of hearing by Elizabeth Burke and Corey Bruner. Today's refreshments and lunches are provided by members of the BUHS Costa Rica Exchange Program, and they will be here until the lunch break. I would also like to call all your attention to the Senator Bill Doyle survey, which should have been on your seat. Senator, excuse me again, Senator Doyle has been doing this, I think, for close to 50 years, and still sits in the Vermont Senate. The tabulation that he puts together on an annual basis is very interesting and useful in terms of state and local government. So please take a minute to fill it out. The box is in the back of the room for you to deposit it when you have a second. The chair would like to go over some procedural rules for the meeting, and before I do so, I'd like to thank Marshall Wheelock for taking time this morning to present a brief overview of town meeting history and some of the rules concerning town meeting. The rules are determined by Vermont law, by the Brattleboro Town Charter, and by Robert's Rules of Order. Now, the charter provides that voting on all matters shall be by standing, or if you're unable to stand, by raising your hand, or by a division of the town meeting members, or by roll call vote of the town meeting members. Secondly, a division of the town meeting members shall be held at the discretion of the moderator or upon demand of 3 or more members. Third, a roll call shall be had upon demand of 6 or more town meeting members. Debate. No town meeting member or voter of the town shall speak more than twice on the same question without leave of the town meeting members. Town meeting members or voters of the town who have once spoken shall not again be entitled to the floor to the exclusion of another who has not spoken. A town meeting member shall not call the question which effectively ends debate on that issue if it passes, immediately after speaking on an issue. All motions and remarks should be addressed to the moderator. And finally, in keeping with our tradition, I would ask that you limit your remarks to not more than 2 minutes. Now, I don't have a timer up here, but I would ask that out of respect to fellow members that you try to limit your remarks as we have in the past. Vermont state law prohibits consideration of articles that have not been warned. This means you cannot take binding action under the article Other Business, and you can't amend a warned article such that it would bring up business that hasn't been warned. Likewise, debate shall be confined to the merits of the question. Please raise your hand to be recognized, and when recognized, you should give your name and speak directly into the microphone once again so that the viewers at home can hear your questions and comments. And then finally, motions should be in writing and given to me so that I can make sure that they're read back correctly. The moderator should have them, and I in turn will pass them on to the clerk. Now, we have, the chair recognizes Mr. Gartenstein for a preliminary motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good morning, everybody. I move that the following persons be authorized to sit in the reserved section with the Select Board and the school directors: Town Manager Peter Elwell, Assistant Town Manager Patrick Moreland, Town Attorney Robert Fisher, School Superintendent Ron Staley, and Business Administrator Frank Rucker.
It has been moved and seconded that the following persons be authorized to sit in the reserved section with the Select Board and school directors: Town Manager Peter Elwell, Assistant Town Manager Patrick Moreland, Town Attorney Robert Fisher, School Superintendent Ron Staley, and Business Administrator Frank Rucker. Mr. Manning. If you would stand up and go to the microphone, please.
Yeah, hello, Dave. Here we go. David Manning. I move to amend the following by adding, and the members of the Select Board and School Board, along with the above-mentioned town and school officials, be seated with the main body.
Is there a second to Mr. Manning's second? Is there discussion? Mr. Manning, do you wish to speak to your motion?
I do.
Okay, you're welcome to go forward.
Hi, I'm David Manning. Don't want to talk into it like that. I'm one of the new representatives this is my first year here. I came to my first meeting here. I was surprised by the way that the meeting was run. And I've done some research with some other town meeting members, and I think that the way the Select Board sits on this front table is not keeping with our bylaws in our town and rules. Technically, the Select Board doesn't exist right now while we are in this meeting. They are members of a Select Board. And because, Mr. Moderator, we should be speaking to you and only to you during this meeting and not to each other, I think that the board members should sit over here so they can address you, because currently the way they're seating, they can't address you. They can only address us.
The question is on Mr. Manning's motion to amend by adding the following, and that the members of the Select Board and School Board, along with the above-mentioned town and school officials, be seated with the main body. Has anyone else got anything to say? Mr. Dimes.
I'm Kurt Dimes, District 2. I agree with Mr. Manning. The position of the Select Board, by virtue of being in front, detracts from the authority of the moderator, because many of us know we often direct our comments to people on the select board first, and their position elevated in this manner with a table, with more microphones than the rest of us who have to walk to a microphone in order to ask for attention or get to an opportunity to speak. It gives them undue authority and control over the meeting. In our charter, their status here is supposed to be equal to everyone. They do not, by law, have we do not have a system of first-class and second-class representatives. And by elevating them this way, they are forced into a position of preeminence, which they do not want, I believe. And the charter says that the select board, or the representative town meeting, Section 2, Article 2, Section 4, says the representative town meeting shall include the members of the select board, not the select board. It says it should include the members of the select board as equal representatives. And they are forced into a position of inequality above the rest of us. Also, by their proximity to the moderator, they get attention like that. In 2015, there's an egregious example of the town attorney actually waving and then speaking out of turn. And we are so accustomed to the dominance of the select board by virtue of their position that we have allowed them eventually to usurp our job. Our job by charter is to be a source of ideas, proposals, and guidance for the town. We, the general body here, are the main body that guides the town. The select board has administrative functions to prepare the budget, to make sure that the ballots go to the printer and all that kind of thing. And otherwise, they should be individual members by charter seated with us. And I agree with that proposal to invite you all to join us. Thank you.
So the question is, shall the motion, preliminary motion, be amended by adding the following? And that the members of the select board and school board, along with the above-mentioned town and school officials, be seated with the main body. Mr. Elwell?
Corwin Elwell, District 3. I would only comment that if any of you have been to other town meetings in Vermont, from Victory to Concord, Newport, Derby, Brattleboro, it has been tradition, because the Board of Selectmen, select people, are the leaders of the community, and therefore they're presenting a budget which they have prepared. They are prepared to defend a warning which they have prepared, and I think we should defeat this motion.
In the back, Mr. Sage.
Rusty Sage, District 1. I do hear the points made about the way we are supposed to do things under our town charter. However, we also need to take into account that past practice, the select board has sat up here. Another thing in regards to the point that we direct questions to the moderator, that is correct, Mr. Moderator, we do direct them to you. However, questions under any article are generally going to be redirected to the select board. And the select board and the school board will be sitting in the microphone so that they can answer these questions easily and readily, rather than having to get up to the microphone every article numerous times to answer those questions. I think we should defeat this.
Yes, the one right behind Mr. Sage. I'm sorry.
The Cassandra Holloway from District 3. I'm just concerned about BCTV being able to film you all properly for the people who can't be here today. So I'm just thinking about the practicality of moving you down here. Thank you.
Mr. Carville?
Mr. Moderator, I move the question.
Mr. Carville has moved to cease debate, and that requires two-thirds vote. And this is to cease debate on the amendment. So do we have a point of order?
Point of order, yes. Spoon agave. As most of you know, I've been here at a lot of meetings, and we've had many debates. We've had many questions moved. I think traditionally, we have always given a reasonable amount of time for all debates. We've never permitted anyone to stand up in 4 or 5 minutes and say, that's enough. I think if there are no more hands up, then it's a time, or if we have gone on for a long, long time, then we have a reason.
I appreciate that, Mr. Gavi, but there has been a motion duly made by Mr. Carville to cease debate, and the chair is compelled to act upon that motion. That motion requires two-thirds approval, so the chair will ask all those in favor of ceasing debate to please rise or raise your hand. You may be seated. All those opposed to please rise. You may be seated. The chair is in doubt as to whether we have two-thirds or not. I'm going to ask for a division on the issue of whether we have two-thirds. All those in favor of ceasing debate on Mr. Manley's motion to amend, please rise and remain standing while you are counted. You may be seated. All those opposed to ceasing debate, please rise and remain standing until counted, or raise your hand. Listen to the, you may be seated, I'm sorry. Listen to the results of your vote. Those in favor of ceasing debate, 91. Those opposed, 33. And you have obtained the requisite two-thirds, and debate on the motion is ceased. Therefore, the question is on the Manning amendment, and the chair will read it, that the members of the Select Board and School Board, along with the above-mentioned town and school officials, be seated with the main body. All those in favor of that amendment, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. You may be seated. And you have defeated the Manley amendment. We then return to the primary motion, which is, shall the following persons be authorized to sit in the reserved section with the Select Board and school directors? Town Manager Peter Elwell, Assistant Town Manager Patrick Moreland, Town Attorney Robert Fisher, School Superintendent Ron Staley, and Business Administrator Frank Rucker. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. You may be seated. And you have approved preliminary motion number 1, and the individuals noted may enter the reserve area. We now move to preliminary motion number 2, and the chair recognizes Ms. O'Connor.
Thank you. I move that the electronic media be permitted to remain in the reserved section.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the electronic media be permitted to remain in the reserve section. Are you ready for that vote? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you have adopted preliminary motion number 2. We now get to the substantive part of the meeting, and the chair recognizes David Scholes for Article 1.
I move the auditor's reports be accepted as printed.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the auditor's reports be approved as printed. Is there any debate? If not, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you have approved Article 1. Article 2, to see if the town and town school district will authorize its select board and school directors to employ a certified public accountant or public accountants. The chair recognizes Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town and town school district authorize the select board and school directors to employ a certified public accountant or public accountants.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the town and school district be authorize its select board and school directors to employ a certified public accountant or public accountants. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you have adopted Article 2. Article 3, to see if the town will ratify, approve, and confirm the Select Board's appointment of a town and town school district clerk for a term of 1 year. The chair recognizes Ms. McCumber.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the appointment of Annette Cappy as town and town school district clerk for a term of 1 year from March 20th, 2016 be ratified, approved, and confirmed.
There is a second, and it has been moved and seconded that the appointment of Annette Cappy as town and town school district clerk for a term of 1 year from March 20th, 2016 be ratified, confirmed, and approved. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. and you have adopted Article 3. Article 4, to see if the town will ratify, approve, and confirm the Select Board's appointment of a town and school district treasurer for a term of 1 year. The chair recognizes Mr. Gartenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the appointment of John O'Connor as town and town school district treasurer for a term of 1 year from March 20, 2016 be ratified, approved, and confirmed.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the appointment of John O'Connor as town and town school district treasurer for a term of 1 year from March 20th, 2016 be ratified, approved, and confirmed. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you have adopted Article 4. Article 5, to see if the town will ratify, approve, and confirm the Select Board's appointment of a town attorney for a term of 1 year. The chair recognizes Ms. O'Connor.
I move that the appointment of the firm of Fisher & Fisher Law Offices, P.C. as a town attorney for a term of 1 year from March 20th, 2016 be ratified, approved, and confirmed.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the appointment of the firm of Fisher & Fisher Law Offices, P.C. as town attorney for a term of 1 year from March 20th, 2016 be ratified, approved, and confirmed. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you have adopted Article 5. Article 6, to elect 2 representatives to the Capital Grant Review Board for a term of 1 year from March 21st, 2016. 2 members will be nominated from the floor. So at this point, the chair would open the floor for nominations to serve on the Capital Grant Review Board for the 1 year beginning March 21st of 2016. Are there any nominations? Don't everybody run at once. Are there any suggestions? Is there anyone who would like to do the job? I'm sorry, yes? Please.
Betsy Gentili, District 3. I'd like to nominate George Herzog.
George Herzog has been nominated. Is there a second? Okay, so we have one. Thank you, Ms. Gentili. Yes, Ms. Manning. See, it just takes a few minutes to...
I'd like to nominate Stephen Phillips, if he would accept the nomination. Stephen
Phillips has been nominated by Ms. Manning. Is there a second to Mr. Phillips's nomination? Second. Are there further nominations? All right. Hearing none. Is there a motion? Yes, there's a question or another nomination? Okay, you should take, I know that that's just a quick point of information, but you should use the microphone if you can. The question is, what does the Capital Grant Review Board do? And the moderator will defer that question to the town manager.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good morning to everyone. The Capital Grants Review Board is called to very occasionally review potential grant applications for capital grants where if we receive the grant and implement the project, there would be ongoing operation and maintenance costs for the community.
All right. Are there any further nominations? If not, the chair would entertain a motion to close nominations. Is there a motion? Is there a second to close nominations? If so, all those in favor of closing nominations, please rise. Thank you. You may be seated. Any opposed? And nominations are now closed, and you have nominated George Herzog and Stephen Phillips. At this point, the chair will recognize Mr. Scholes. With regard,
I move that the following people be appointed to serve on the Capital Grants Review Board for a term of 1 year from March 21st, 2016. George Herzog and Stephen Phillips.
is there a second? All those in favor of the appointment to the Capital Grant Review Board for a term of 1 year from March 21st, 2016 of Mr. Herzog and Mr. Phillips, please rise. You may be seated. Any opposed? And Mr. Herzog and Mr. Phillips are members of the Capital Grant Review Committee. We now move to Article 7 to see if the town will elect or appoint members of the Town Finance Committee for a term of 1 year from March 21st, 2016. And once again, members will be nominated from the floor. So before we get into the heart of the motion, the chair would open the floor to nominations for the Finance Committee for the next year. Are there nominations? Mr. Reichman.
Franz Reichman, District 2. I want to nominate myself. And I'd like to encourage other people to do the same.
Is there a second to Mr. Reichman's nomination? Okay, so Mr. Reichman is nominated. Mr. Montgomery, you had your hand up. And you may nominate yourself, by the way.
Tad Montgomery, District 2, I'd like to nominate Avery Schwenk.
Mr. Schwenk is now nominated. Are there further nominations? Mr. Mima.
Yeah, Mr. Moderator. Ralph Mima, District 3. I'd like to nominate myself.
Okay. Is there a second to Mr. Mima's? Okay. Mr. Reed Savory.
Good morning, Mr. Moderator. I would like to nominate, George Reed Savory, District 2.
Thank you.
I'd like to nominate Maya Hasagawa.
Second.
Is there a second? I hear the second. So Maya Hasagawa has been nominated. Are there further nominations? Ms. Melton.
Paula Melton, District 1. I'd like to nominate myself.
Is there a second to Paula Melton? Yes. Doing good here this morning. We're on a roll. So, Mr. Davison.
Good morning, Ricky Davidson, District 3. I'd like to nominate Carrie Storm.
Is there a second for the nomination of Carrie Storm? Further nominations? I saw some other hands. No other nominations or any other volunteers? Mr. Corbeil, you're volunteering great. Please, would you go to the microphone?
I'm up here as a point of order.
Okay, sir.
Now, when the nomination or the setting up of the Finance Committee, it goes way back to 1972. I wrote an article in the paper about setting up a Finance Committee. And fortunately, I was elected as selectman at the time. And so I think the manner of appointment is not for this body to make. The decision was that the moderator was to make the appointments for the Finance Committee. And I don't remember, but I think there was a number beyond the Finance Committee. Maybe 5 to 7. Not any less, not any more. And I just want to bring that up as a point of order as to how this should be handled. But I appreciate the way you did handle it. And it's nice to have the people come up and make their offer themselves. Thank you.
Mr. Corbeil, thank you.
Mr. Corbeil.
Okay. In anticipation of this article, the chair did take a look at the charter on this question, and the charter does say, and I quote, that representative town meetings shall fix and from time to time may alter the number of members, the manner of their selection, their term of office, their compensation, if any, and other duties and functions. And the committee may choose its own officers. That's the way that it reads in the charter. So at one time, I know that traditionally we had the moderator appoint, and I think that part of that was because we were having difficulty in finding people to step up to the plate to serve. And so it fell on the moderator to appoint people. But the charter, in the chair's opinion, does give us the authority to appoint as many as we choose, and we can do that by election, or you could direct that the moderator appoint the members. At this point, we have the following nominations: Mr. Reichman, Maima Schwenk, Hasegawa, Milton, and Storm. I think I've got everybody. Are there further nominations? Okay. Hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion to close nomination. Is there a second? All those in favor of closing nominations, please rise. You may be seated. Those opposed, please rise. And at this point, the chair will recognize Mr. Allen for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. That was a long process. I move that the following people be appointed to serve on the Representative Town Meeting Finance Committee for a term of 1 year from March 21st, 2016. Franz Reichman, Avery Schwenk, Ralph Mima, Mia Maya Hasegawa, Paul Melton, and Carrie Storm.
Is there Excuse me, go ahead.
Further authorize the moderator to make additional interim appointments to the Finance Committee for a term to expire at the next annual representative town meeting.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion? Further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you have appointed a Finance Committee at this point of 6 members. Thank you all. We now turn to Article 8, to elect 3 trustees for the Brooks Memorial Library to serve 3 years, and 1 trustee to fill an unexpired term of 2 years. The names for consideration for 3-year term 2016 through 2019 are Pamela Becker, Howard Burrows, and Jane Southworth. Person for consideration for the unexpired term 2016 to 2017 shall be included in the motion. Appointed shall be nominated from the floor, but I believe we have some nominations. The chair would recognize Ms. McCumber.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the following people be appointed to serve on the Board of Trustees for the Brooks Memorial Library: Pamela Becker, Howard Burrows, and Jane Southworth for 3-year terms, 2016 to 2019, and Connie Bresnahan for the unexpired term, 2016 to 2017, and Jenny Rowe for an unexpired term, 2016 to 2018.
Is there a second? Okay, so the motion is that the following people be appointed to serve on the Board of Trustees of the Brooks Memorial Library. It would be Pamela Becker, Howard Burrows, and Jane Southworth for a 3-year term, 2016 to 2019, and Connie Bresnahan for the unexpired term from 2016 to 2017, and Jenny Rowe for an unexpired term, 2016 to 2018. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. Those opposed, please rise. And you have unanimously approved Article 8. Article 9, to see if the town will approve an amendment to the Brattleboro Town Charter, Addendum A, Act of 1959, Number 302, Section 4A, to change the deadline for incumbent town meeting members to submit their notice of intent to have their names placed on the ballot to not later than 6th Monday prior to the election as presented in the town report. And the chair recognizes Mr. Gartenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town amend the Brattleboro Town Charter Addendum A, Acts of 1959, Number 302, Section 4A, to change the deadline for incumbent town meeting members to submit their notice of intent to have their name placed on a ballot to the 6th Monday preceding the election, as presented on page 9 of the town report.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded, as just stated by Mr. Gartenstein. Is there any debate? Mr. Agavi.
I would like to ask a question and then, depending on the answer, have a follow-up, and this is addressed to the town clerk. It states that it would be the 6th Monday, and that's the way it has traditionally been. Is that state law?
The town clerk is interrogated if she chooses to be.
Thank you. The 6th Monday is state law. Our charter had also called for the 7th Monday for just incumbent town meeting members to submit their notice. This is changing just the deadline for incumbent town meeting members from the 7th Monday to the 6th Monday to be in line with all the other petition deadlines. And basically this was initiated because now the town celebrates Martin Luther King Day, which I think, will probably always be the 7th Monday beforehand, before the election. So this just puts the incumbent town meeting members only in line with the rest of the town and the rest of the state for the 6th Monday.
Thank you. It probably doesn't make a lot of difference, but I'd like to point out the reason that I'm here and speaking at all on this. Traditionally, it has been the 6th Monday, but there's been a new change that's been occurring in our electoral system over some years, and it's becoming pretty widespread and pronounced now, and that is early voting. When we don't have or require petitions until the 6th Monday, that's 42 days before an election, early voting is now beginning and is becoming more and more heavily used 30 days before an election. And that is now just leaving 12 days in which a candidate has to reach, or to have a campaign to reach all of the voters before the voting begins.
I think you're confusing state and federal elections with local elections. For state and federal elections, we start early voting 45 days in advance. So the petition deadline for state candidates is way ahead of that.
Right.
We're only talking about local elections, and local elections.
So am I.
Right. So we follow state law, which is 20 days. Absentee ballots are available 20 days before each
20
local
days.
election.
Okay, so the
and we've not changed that in the charter.
campaign is now, so there are now 22 days in which a person can campaign.
Correct, and that's always been that way. The 6th Monday has always been in effect.
I know that.
Okay.
I know that, but it used to be absentee ballots that we now call early voting used to be only a very slim number, and now it's becoming a larger and larger, and I fear that elections are almost going to be over before Election Day.
Well, you can't vote early if you don't have the ballot. And you have to have the ballot
Yeah,
printed.
I realize that. Okay.
And you have to have the petitions in to
All
get
right. This is not a debate here. I'll see.
I just want you to understand.
Mr. Manning had a point of order.
This back and forth right here is why I was asking maybe them to come down, because Ms. Cappy, you should be addressing the moderator. Address the moderator. Everyone needs to address the moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. That is true, and I would ask that you would attempt to do that, although Ms. Cappy is sitting right here with me. Further debate. The question is, on Article 9, shall the town amend the Brattleboro Town Charter, Addendum A, Acts of 1959, number 302, Section 4A, to change the deadline for incumbent town meeting members to submit their notice of intent to have their name placed on the ballot to the 6th Monday preceding the election, as presented on page 9 of the town report. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you have approved Article 9. Article 10, to see if the town will approve an amendment to the Brattleboro Town Charter, Article 2, Section 3, to allow mechanical tabulation of ballots from citizens who use early voting as presented in the town report. Chair calls on Ms. O'Connor.
Thank you. I move that the town amend the Brattleboro Town Charter, Article 2, Section 3, to allow mechanical tabulation of ballots from citizens who use early voting as presented on page 9 of the town report.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the town amend the Brattleboro Town Charter, Article 2, Section 3, to allow mechanical tabulation of ballots from citizens who use early voting as presented on page 9 of the town report. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you have adopted Article 10. We move to Article 11, to see if the town will authorize its select board to borrow money in anticipation of taxes, grants, and other revenue. The chair recognizes Mr. Scholes.
I move that the Select Board be authorized to borrow money on its notes in anticipation of taxes, grants, and other revenue.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the Select Board be authorized to borrow money on its notes in anticipation of taxes, grants, and other revenue. Is there discussion? If not, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. Those opposed, please rise. And you have approved Article 11. Article 12, to see what salaries the town will pay its officers. Chair recognizes Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the salaries of the Select Board be set at $30,000. Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute. So, I put it in the wrong spot. Set at $3,000 each, that the salary of the chairperson be set at $5,000, and that the Select Board be authorized to fix the salaries of all other town officers for the fiscal year 2017.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the salaries of the Select Board be set at $3,000 each, that the salary of the chairperson be set at $5,000, and that the Select Board be authorized to fix the salaries of all other town officials for the fiscal year 2017. Are you ready for that question? Mr. Dimes.
Kurt Dimes, District 2. I've made this proposal before. I think the Select Board has a very hard job, administerial job, and that the job should be available to people who can't afford the volunteer time. It should be a seriously paid position. Therefore, I move to amend the motion to have the Select Board members paid $20,000 and the chairman $25,000. This makes it available to people who can't afford the daycare. It makes the job available to people who want to serve but don't have the time and money for serious volunteership. And I hope, well, I'll be proposing it every year, almost every year. I respect the very, very difficult job, administerial job that the Select Board has. It should be available to all citizens.
Mr. Dimes has moved that the motion be amended to increase the salary to $20,000 each for the Select Board and $25,000 for the chairperson. Is there a second? Second? It has been moved and seconded that the article be amended to increase the salary to $20,000 each for the Select Board and $25,000 for the chair. Is there any debate? Mr. McKinnon.
Hi, Dylan McKinnon, District 2. Though I doubt the motion will go through, will get voted in. That's the reason why I wouldn't consider running for Select Board, because I can't afford to. So it is I think it is a very valid point. I couldn't afford daycare. I couldn't afford my wife watching my young son at home. So I feel it's a very valid point.
Further debate? Yes. Holloway. Ms. Holloway.
Thanks. from District 3. I just wanted to say, although I see there's validity, I don't know how many hours you all spend, and it might be good to kind of a breakdown of like that piece if before we would make a proposal on how much to increase that significant amount. That's pretty significant, so I would think it would be good to have a breakdown of how many hours and like childcare or whatever to propose that to us as reps before I would make a decision on such an increase.
Are you interrogating one of the members of the select board, or are
No,
you
I
saying
just-
that you would think this is something that should be done in the future?
Correct, yes, the second.
Okay,
Yeah, thanks.
got it. Further debate? Mr. Manning?
I'll interrogate a member of the select board, whoever wants to take it. How many hours a week is this job?
Is there a member of the select board that can respond to Mr. Manning's question? Mr. Scholes would like to respond?
I don't think it's possible to say how many hours because it's different, particularly every year. The year of the skate park, it was more than the year we didn't have the skate park. The last couple of years with police fire has involved way more time than any previous years, and the time spent finding the right town manager was also. They aren't typical. Typically, it's a few hours a week every other week in meetings, and maybe 4 or 5 hours reading the materials. But this year, it's been. I mean, we practically move in together. We could share daycare if our children were younger. So it's really hard to say. But if we tried to figure the last year or two on an hourly basis, 20,000 wouldn't be enough.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Manning?
It did. I'd just like to say $20,000 is about half-time job. So if you're spending 20 hours a week, I think it's pretty reasonable that they get compensated for their time.
The issue is on the Dimes Amendment to increase the salaries of the select board to $20,000 each and $25,000 for the chair. Mr. Carville.
George Carville, District 1. I really appreciate all the time that the Select Board and the School Board put in to their second job. And I think it's really part of the fabric that these jobs be volunteer, that the folks who service so well don't do it for the money. That said, shows you how I'll vote. However, I would not at all be opposed in the future to some discussion of providing childcare, perhaps other incentives to make it possible for folks to serve on the board from a broader economic representation from the town.
Further debate on the Dimes Amendment. I'm going to, Mr. McKinnon, you've already spoken once. I will take you a second time, but I'm going to give everybody, yes, ma'am, a chance to speak first.
Susan Stefersky, District 2. I like the idea of the higher salary or compensation for the sake of those people who would not otherwise be able to serve. It seems to me that there may also be members of the Select Board who do not need or desire that compensation, and that they should be allowed to donate part of that back to the town.
Further debate on the Dimes Amendment. Mr. McKinnon?
I would argue that 20,000 to 25,000 wouldn't be, with all due respect, George, wouldn't be doing it for the money. That's barely a living wage. Select board members put in countless hours. It's not a 9-to-5 job where you can just go home and forget about it. This is something that you live with. I don't think anyone's going into it as a career choice. Oh, I'm going to become a selectman. That's my career path. That's my retirement plan. I think simply giving people an option for being able to live with that, as opposed to having to be retired or having to work a second and third job to be able to afford to pay for your volunteer time as select board.
Further debate, Ms. Davison.
Judy Davidson, District 3. I think the challenge is that being on the select board isn't just the number of hours. It's it's being in a public place, having people like or dislike what you do. So there's a lot more that goes on to being a select board member than just the amount of money. And they deserve our respect and they deserve our appreciation for what they do for us. The question I would have would be, would it be possible to have public meetings in which people who were interested in serving on the select board but were financially challenged to be able to do that or needed childcare? I'd be interested in how many people in the community would take advantage of it, given all the responsibility, and not just the responsibility, but being in a public place and having your opinions not always liked, among the other challenges of the job. So I think it would be something to explore, because definitely the job is challenging and time-consuming, as Mr. Scholes has reported specifically these last couple of years, and we can tell that from being members of town meeting, the kinds of meetings we've had. So I would be interested in exploring this question in the future by having some public meetings and soliciting people to come forward who might like to serve, and describing what are their challenges. Is it childcare? What else is it? As well as financial. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Melton.
Paula Melton, District 1. I just have a question about later in the meeting. So if this were to pass, would we need to make an amendment to the budget? How would that work? Thank you.
Member of the administration is, Mr. Elwell, is interrogated on that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, if the body is otherwise inclined to approve the budget as it has been proposed, then during discussion of Article 19, you would entertain an amendment to add $88,000 to the budget in order to cover the expense of this item.
Further debate, further questions? Mr. Agave.
When I was young and learning about the world, I somehow was always more than too willing to believe that in the end, everything would always work out. In spite of what the signs were or the logic, that somehow it was all going to be okay. And so, I think we all felt that way. And so it was also okay if our government and our leadership just took care of the basics. They filled the potholes, made sure we had water and roads, etc. And everything else would take care of itself. It would be okay. And so we wrote a charter which gave duties and powers to the boards to do just that, to fill the potholes, make sure the town manager was hired, etc. Well, the world has turned out to be a very different place. A lot of the worst things that we ever imagined happening look like they're on the horizon now. And what this issue speaks to is the level or the quantity or quality of leadership that we need from here forward. I don't know, I don't believe that a few hours a week is enough for the kind of leadership that we now need. I would like to see, I don't know how, it would be nice if the state offered actual courses, college courses or something of that nature to train and educate select board members around the state. But we do need a lot more than we get. We are beyond the point where all we need to do is fill potholes. We need planning, we need study, we need real understanding. So if $20,000 would move us towards a leadership that was much more heavily engaged, I will support that.
Further debate on the Dimes Amendment. Mr. Fallion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Fallion, District 3. I think what this discussion is also bringing up is the need to improve ongoing communication between the town and its leaders. And I refer back to a discussion when Ken Schneck was a select board member. And he wanted very much to open up the select board to the digital age. And at the time, that idea was shelved. I think it's time that we bring back consideration of what makes sense in the 21st century in terms of using the incredible technology at our disposal. The purpose would be to improve the ongoing communication between select board when it's meeting and the town who are at home. I am very aware that the new generation is working harder, longer, has more demands on its time than perhaps I did when I was their age. But I see a lot and I talk to a lot of young people who really want to have the opportunity to engage in real time with their select board during their meetings. And I think it's time that the select board put it on the agenda to look at this consideration. How could they do this while keeping the open meeting law firmly in mind? There would be considerations. That's why I say it's a suggestion to consider this. I think it would go a long way, perhaps not to bringing people up to be on the select board, but in terms of recruiting future leaders. Get them interested, have them participate on an ongoing basis while they're at home, tending to their children while their spouse works, for example, but vitally interested in the town business. So my suggestion is perhaps you could put that on your agenda. Mr. Moderator, if you pass that on to the select board. Thank you.
I'm not going to try not to interrupt, but once again, I have to remind everyone that we want to keep our debate to the question that is before us. These are all good comments and very valid comments, and I'm sure the select board wants to hear them. The question, however, is on the Dimes Amendment, which is, shall we amend the article to increase the amount of compensation to the select board to $20,000 and to the chair to $25,000? The moderator will hear Mr. Gartenstein on this issue. You do not? Okay. There was, Mr. Harvey had his hand up.
George Harvey, District 3. I want to point out that what we're talking about is the compensation for the coming year, which is going to be given to people who I believe ran with the expectation that they were going to get that compensation or something similar. So if we pass this amendment now, we're going to be giving $88,000 to a group of people who didn't expect it. It's going to be a windfall. And I think that I think the Dimes Amendment is a very worthwhile thing to think about for the future. But I don't think it's a good idea to pass it right now. And so I would like this considered in the future. I'm not sure how that would be done. I think perhaps it could be brought up as other business at the end of the meeting.
Ms. Atkinson.
Margaret Atkinson, District 2. Thank you, Select Board, for all your work. Lord knows, serving in any of the governance bodies of this town takes a lot of time. And there are sacrifices to be made if that is the volunteer opportunity that people choose. I think the stipend offered to Select Board and school board members is put in place to help ameliorate those, hire that babysitter, buy that frozen pizza, to help people to get through doing that work. When you begin to talk about professionalizing the salary of town governance, you are going to open the door to professional political operations. And I would just say that at this time in this country, there are plenty of people who are getting paid quite a lot of money to be part of the governance structure of this state and this country. So I would ask the body to think about what should the stipend be to meet reasonable expenses for volunteers, and what door are we opening to professional politicians in this town? I think sometimes the ability of people to become very comfortable in their elected office prevents change from happening.
Ms. McLaughlin.
Elizabeth McLaughlin, District 3. I just wanted to point out that 4 times 20, I don't think the numbers add up, because, yeah, 105, not 88.
105, but minus the original proposal is 3,000 each. So that would be 12,000 plus 5 for the chair would be 17. Ms. Starr.
Brandy Starr, District 1. I just want to kind of quantify $3,000. For one of my children to go to daycare for 1 month is $1,126. That's my high-end child. I also have one that goes for a little bit under $1,000, so $3,000 isn't really very much money.
Ms. Boubalis.
Dora Boubalis, District 3. I wasn't planning on speaking on this. I kind of go along with what George said, because this is a discussion that should be had. As someone who comes from a profession that pays $20,000, $25,000 a year for a full-time job, professionalizing is not $20,000, $25,000. Professionalizing would be taking it to the average median income, which is $50,000. So I just had to speak to that comment of it, because you're talking about a very small amount of money.
Further debate on the Dimes Amendment. Mr. Webster.
Mr. Moderator. I'm between the tall and the short of things here. Anyway, Mr. Moderator, Don Webster, District 3. I found the discussion very interesting. I am moved by the concern that compensation is such that it seriously prevents access by a significant number of people. And that's important to me. On the other hand, from a process point of view, I think the worst thing, given the complexities of what we're talking about, is to try to make a specific dollar allocation on the floor of a body here without thorough understanding what the consequences of those decisions, what that decision would be. And so I think it's very unwise to do this. On the other hand, I think it's worthy of study, and I'd like to propose a motion, an amendment to the motion, Mr. Dine's motion. Can I do that?
You may.
And the amendment is to request the Board of Selectmen to design a process by which the community can look into the issue of compensation for Select Board and School Board members and report back to this town at the next town meeting.
Okay, now, did you have that? You don't have it written out then. Tell me, all right, so say it again, request the board.
To investigate and study the situation of compensation for Select Board members and School Board directors, and to report back to this body with its recommendations as to what would be appropriate for the future. In other words, it's a serious issue. Let's take time to study it and address the real issues that are really there that the amendment has raised and this discussion has raised.
So, Mr. Webster, what you would be doing is
substituting that
you
for
would
the
be
body.
you would be seeking to substitute your amendment for the Dimes amendment.
That's correct.
And your amendment would read that the board investigate and study, in a nutshell, investigate and study the compensation of the Select Board and the School Board.
That's correct.
And to report back to this body.
At the next meeting.
Okay. Is there a second to the... Yes, Mr. Phillips.
To be complete, I agree with Mr. Webster's suggestion. This one? Steve Phillips, District 3. To be complete, I do agree with Mr. Webster's suggestion, but to be complete, shouldn't there also be a tack on to adopt the compensation that's in the main motion? Because otherwise it's not germane to either of the proposals.
We would go back upstream, Mr. Phillips, and ultimately, depending upon what happened with Mr. Webster's motion, if Mr. Webster's motion is adopted, then that in effect would amend Mr. Dimes's motion, which would in turn amend the original motion, and we would then vote on the original motion. So what I'm trying to do is take one little piece at a time.
Okay.
All right? And by the way, you can only have, under Robert's Rules of Order, this is what is known as a secondary amendment. The primary amendment is Mr. Dimes's. You can only go one step below that, and Mr. Webster just did that. This is a secondary amendment. It is an amendment to an amendment. That's it. We can't go any further until we dispose of Mr. Webster's amendment. And Mr. Webster's amendment, as moved, is to request the board to investigate and study compensation for the Select Board and the School Board and to report back to this body. Now, is there a second? I may have already asked that, did I? Second, all right. Now, I want to limit debate just to Mr. Webster's motion. Is there debate with regard to Mr. Webster's motion? Ms. Turnus.
Catherine Turnus, District 3. I think we already have a qualified group of people who just got nominated called the Finance Committee. who could take on something like this. I was on the Finance Committee. It's like something that we could sink our teeth into.
Further debate on the Webster motion to amend to refer this for study by the Select Board. Mr. Dimes.
Although it seems Kurt Dimes, District 2. Although it seems friendly, I believe Mr. Webster's amendment is inappropriate. Firstly, it assigns to one body the job of the duties of another, and I would subsequently interrogate the town attorney about that. There's injunction against this in our charter. As it is the representative town meeting's job to set salaries, compensations, it is simply illegal to assign that job to another branch of government. Secondly, about the money, I don't think we should worry about that. I will propose later an amendment to the budget I have in mind, which will more than compensate for the additional $88,000. So if I could interrogate Mr. Fisher briefly.
Mr. Fisher is interrogated, should he choose to be.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. With regard to the charter, the compensation is to be voted upon by representative town meeting, and we have done that. With regard to the Webster amendment, though, that is asking to study this whole issue. So if that's going to be a public discussion, to have the motion, have the Select Board study that is appropriate. Now, that would have to come back, obviously, for next year's town meeting, because every year we vote on the compensation for the Select Board. So that will not change. It's just the discussion would first be studied by the Select Board and then obviously debated here at representative town meeting.
Thank you, Counselor.
Mr. Barber. Mr. Barber.
Good morning, Mr. Moderator.
Good morning.
I may have missed something here, but I think we're getting into the woods, and this may be a point of order. We are sitting right now as the government of the town, and we're talking about compensating the Select Board, which is part of the government of the town. Pretty soon, I hope, before lunch, we're going to be sitting as the government of the town school district. And we're going to be interrogating the town school board. And the compensation for each of those pieces of our government, town and town schools, are supported by different tax rates. So I would urge the defeat of the Dimes Amendment, and let's just slow down a little bit. I would certainly urge the Select Board to set up a process to figure out what would make sense for the town part, and I would urge perhaps the school board to do the same thing for its piece of this. But this, I think we're sitting with the left part of our brain when the right part of our brain is going to kick in later. So let's slow down.
So the question is on the Webster amendment. The question is, shall the Dimes amendment be substituted for the Webster amendment that says that we request the board to investigate and study the compensation of the select board and school board and report back. Now, that's what we've got currently under consideration. Do we have further questions or further debate? Mr. Maxwell.
Jim Maxwell, District 3. Very quickly, I'm not sure I heard correctly. Aren't we voting to have Mr. Webster's, the Dimas amendment be substituted by Mr. Webster's amendment, not for Mr. Webster's amendment?
That's correct. I might have stated it wrong.
That's fine.
You're
I just
right.
wanted to make sure that
You're
the
right.
TV got it right.
That's correct. Further debate on the Webster amendment, Ms. Manning.
Hi, Sherry Manning, District 1. It is, I suppose it's a question, but I'm under the impression, at least when I was on the school board, and aware that the select board, that we have increased the amount over the time, and that each body has the authority already to investigate, and when seemly or timely, present a motion to increase that amount. So I didn't believe that Mr. Webster's motion needs to be supported or voted on because it's already in place. Is that, I would like to ask Mr. Gartenstein, would you agree with that? Am I under the impression that's correct?
Mr. Gartenstein is interrogated should he wish to be.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Ms. Manning. 4 years ago, maybe, Mr. Everett moved to increase the salary of select board members from $2,000 and $3,000 to $3,000 and $5,000, and that was adopted at town meeting. When we are developing the warning, all of the articles are considered, and should there be any public input about any article, including the article relating to the salary of select board members, there is a time for public input for that at select board meeting in a manner that's duly noticed and warned so that everybody's got the ability to participate.
Further debate on the Webster motion to amend. Mr. Webster.
Don Webster, District, Mr. Moderator, District 3. The only thing I'm concerned about by my amendment is I would have preferred perhaps to say each board do it separately rather than mix it up. That's true, because I did this on the fly, and maybe that could be changed or something. I feel that the select board can take any method they would like to. If they'd like to make the decision and study it themselves, if they want to ask the finance committee to do it, if they want a special committee to do it, that doesn't make any difference. I'm just saying the selectmen are responsible for getting a study done. The other part of it is yes, they have the select board certainly has the authority to recommend 4,000 next year or 5, whatever they do, whatever they put in the warning. This amendment is to make sure they study it. It's just to make sure they study it. I'm sure they might do it on their own, but I think we have an obligation, given the quality of the questions we're asked about the equity of the situation, to look into it. And so, Sherry, all things considered, I'd prefer to have the selectmen directed to do that.
The question is on Mr. Webster's motion to substitute the following language for the Dimes Amendment, that the Select Board investigate and study the compensation of select people and the board of, and the school board. that is in replace of or in substitution for the Dimes Amendment. Mr. Reichman.
Franz Reichman, District 2. I'm going to suggest that people might want to defeat Mr. Webster's amendment and defeat Mr. Dimes' amendment and go with the original, and that I think I can promise that the Finance Committee will look into this in the coming year and make it part of its report for next year. Thank you.
Again, yes, Doctor.
Yeah, I would actually support the last speaker with the notion of defeating both amendments and letting the Finance Committee look into it. Because the other thing I think we're talking about, I've been part of organizations that started out as volunteer and then began to pay people. And I don't think we pay the Select Board and the School Board for what they do because we couldn't pay them enough. They would be getting $100,000 apiece or more. What I think we do is we give them a present at the end of the year or during the year to show our appreciation for all of the hard work they do. And we live in a state that still has a volunteer legislature. And people have talked about professionalizing the legislature. And I think we're talking about professionalizing the Select Board. And I think that's a really major philosophical discussion that needs to be thought about very carefully in terms of its implications. And would love to see that come back as a discussion for next year, not just talking about the amount of the present that we give them.
Further discussion on the Webster motion to substitute the Dimes Amendment. Yes.
Hello, Mr. Moderator. Ronnie Byrne, District 3. I'd like to voice my agreement with the previous two speakers and also add that I'm a new town meeting representative. It's a position that I'm taking pretty seriously, and on matters such as this that involve potential increases to salaries and potential impacts to people in the town, as well, and particularly in the district that I represent, I'm disinclined to vote on make these kinds of decisions that are just brought up like this from the floor of town meeting. If this were brought up next year as an article, then I would have a chance to talk to the folks in my neighborhood, find out what their feelings are on the subject, and then cast my vote appropriately. So I am urging the defeat of both Mr. Dimes' amendment and the subsequent amendment as well. Thank you.
Further debate on the Webster Amendment. Point of order, Mr. Webster.
How long did we read? We had to come here on the microphone for every question. Select Board. A point of order is this. Since Mr. Reichman has expressed an interest in taking up the committee, this study and reporting back to us, I am willing to withdraw my amendment.
Mr. Webster has suggested that he would withdraw his amendment unless there is objection. The chair will grant that request. Their chair not hearing any objection, we now return to the principal amendment of Mr. Dimes, which is, shall we increase the amount of compensation to each member of the Select Board by $20,000 and to the chairperson to to 20, not by 20,000, but to 20,000, and to the chairman to 25,000. Are you ready for that question? Is there any further debate? Mr. Dimes?
Kurt Dimes, District 2. I am happy with the quality of the debate today. I was, however, hoping someone would offer the amendment to make the raises effective at the next election cycle for each position. And I hope that that possibility does not escape us.
At this point, Mr. Dimes, the motion that is on the floor is your initial motion. It's been made and seconded, and the chair has stated it. And the question is, do we have any further debate on the Dimes amendment as presented to increase the compensation of each select board member to 20,000 and to increase the chair's compensation to a total of 25,000? Further debate? If not, all those in favor of the Dimes amendment increasing the compensation, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. You may be seated. And you have defeated the Dimes amendment, and we...
Order. Can we do a roll call? Point of order. I was kidding.
Thank you, Mr. Dimes. I didn't know that. All right, we return. We return to the principal motion, which is that the salaries of the Select Board be set at $3,000 each, that the salary of the chairperson be set at $5,000, and that the Select Board be authorized to fix the salaries of all other town officials for fiscal year 2017. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you may be seated, and you have adopted Article 12. Article 13. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $78,000 through special assessments on properties within the Downtown Improvement District as approved by the town meeting March 19, 2005, and as delineated in the town ordinance entitled Municipal Act to Establish and Regulate the Downtown Improvement District, to be used for capital and operating costs of projects of the town's duly designated downtown organization as reflected in its work plan and budget. The chair recognizes Ms. McCumber.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $78,000 through special assessments on properties within the Downtown Improvement District as approved by town meeting March 19, 2005, and as delineated in the town ordinance entitled Municipal Act to Establish and Regulate the Downtown Improvement District, to be used for capital and operating costs of projects of the town's duly designated downtown organization as reflected in its work plan and budget.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded as just read by Ms. McCumber. Is there further debate or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. Those opposed, please rise. You may be seated, and you have adopted Article 13. Article 14, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $223,276.48 through special assessments on property within the Mountain Home Park Special Benefit Assessment Tax District as approved by town meeting on March 24, 2007, and as delineated in the town ordinance entitled Municipal Acts to Establish and Regulate the Mountain Home Park Special Benefit Assessment Tax District for the purpose of paying debt service on the capital improvements to the water and sewer lines serving Mountain Home and Deepwood Mountain Home Park. Chair recognizes Mr. Gartenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $223,276.48 through special assessments on property within the Mountain Home Park Special Benefit Assessment Tax District as approved by town meeting March 24, 2007, and as delineated in the town ordinance entitled Municipal Act to Establish and Regulate the Mountain Home Park Special Benefit Assessment Tax District for the purpose of paying debt service on the capital improvements to the water and sewer lines serving the Mountain Home and Deepwood mobile home parks.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded as just read by Mr. Gartenstein. Is there debate? Yes.
Michael Bosworth, District 1. It's not so much a debate, a suggestion perhaps for future years. It's my understanding that the mobile home parks are responsible for paying this. I think it's a long-term bond. And we don't have a real good idea ourselves, the rest of us, how much that impacts the individual homeowners within Mountain Home or Deepwood, or Mountain Park or Deepwood. Would it be helpful for us to appreciate that, just to get sort of what is the impact on the individual homeowners? Also understand that, especially after Tropical Storm Irene, a number of those homes were destroyed, and there's still additional homes that it makes sense if we can slowly move them out of the floodplain so they'll no longer be part of the park. So each individual homeowner then has to pay more of that, bigger share or, of that amount. So I think it'd be just useful in future years to sort of see what that's been historically. What was the progression of what the individual homeowner has to pay?
Thank you, Mr. Bosworth. Other comments or debate on Article 14? Mr. Corbeil?
Mike Corbeil, District 2. My question is only, how long is this going to take before this won't be up on our articles? It started, what, in 2007? Now, in order to pay this debt, how many more years is this going to creep up?
A member of the administration is interrogated. Mr. Alwell.
There are approximately 18 more years to go on the repayment of the bond.
That was on a 25-year bond payment?
I'm further informed by staff that there was some deferral of payments during the initial period of repayment related to Tropical Storm Irene. And so the initial term on the bond was 20 years, but there are approximately 18 years remaining for the repayment as it was either restructured or just deferred at that time. If you need a deeper dive into that, I'd be happy to hand the mic down to those who have been involved in that in the wake of Irene.
Well, I believe that a lot of members probably don't understand what the article is pertaining to, and I believe it has to do with the ownership of Mountain Home Trailer Park. And I believe that the job that was done up there at the time they purchased, it took a lot of money from the town people, us, paying the taxes for this thing, through the new ownership and all this kind of stuff. And I just wondered, it would be bonded for a period of time, so this will be on here for another 18 years.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And it's taking the taxpayer, the payment of this work off of us. And they're paying it for themselves.
Yes.
That's it.
May I?
Yes, instead of getting the debate going back, I think we understand your question, Mr. Corbeil. The question is, do the taxpayers as a whole pay this, or is this limited to a certain geographic area that is paying this bond? And if you could respond to that.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the town as a whole is the underwriter of this debt. That's why the town is involved at all. That's why there is an annual action taken by town meeting. But the purpose of this article is in fact to have town meeting approve the assessment to the individual property owners within the trailer park. So it is the initial responsibility is with the owners of the mobile home park. The underlying foundation for how they were able to acquire this debt and make these improvements was that the town partnered with them, and that's why there's an annual item instead of just a private debt.
I understand the situation, but I don't think the whole body does. And I just feel as though this is going to be on this article for the next 18 years. That's what I say. And we are not going to be involved. It's the Mountain Home Trailer Park that's involved. Thank you.
Further debate with regard to Article 14. The question is, shall the town raise and appropriate the sum of $223,276.48 through special assessments on property within the Mountain Home Park Special Benefit Assessment Tax District, as approved by the town meeting December 24, 2007, and as delineated in the town ordinance entitled Municipal Act to establish and regulate the Mountain Home Park Special Benefit Assessment Tax District, for the purpose of paying debt service on the capital improvement to the water and sewer lines serving Mountain Home and Deepwood Mobile Parks. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. Those opposed, please rise. And you have adopted Article 14. I see a few people getting up to take a stretch, and unless there's objection, we'll take a 10-minute recess and return in 10 minutes to take up Article 15. We now turn to Article 15. To see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $10,000 to assist in funding Brattleboro climate protection. The chair recognizes Ms. O'Connor.
Thank you. I move that the town raise and appropriate the sum not to exceed $10,000 to assist in funding Brattleboro climate protection.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the town raise and appropriate the sum not to exceed $10,000 to assist in funding Brattleboro climate protection. Is there any debate?
James Southwest District 2. I would like to ask a question, which is that I don't understand the relationship between Brattleboro climate protection and the town energy committee, and to what degree this amount of money that we're being asked to vote on supports both or either. And thank you.
Is there a member of the administration that is able to respond to this question?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is not funding for the Town Energy Committee. It is funding support. It's not the whole support, but it's the town's contribution to the funding of the nonprofit entity, Brattleboro Climate Protection, which in fact does provide staff support to the Energy Committee and does a lot of work together with the Energy Committee.
further debate? Mr. Myman.
Mr. Moderator, Ralph Myman, District 3. I would just like to briefly speak in favor of the continued existence and funding of Brattleboro climate protection, as furthered by this article, because as someone who has been a member of the Energy Committee for quite a few years, I have to go back and look at my calendars, but I think I was appointed in 2007, 8, whenever it was created. I'm back on the committee now. Paul Cameron, in his role as the, I think, sole employee of Brattleboro Climate Protection, has been able to provide an incredible service and sort of long-term level of support, information, and institutional memory to enable the Energy Committee to work efficiently year after year. And I know that's not the only role of Brattleboro Climate Protection, but it's one very key service to the town. And there are a variety of other things that have come up in the town from time to time in connection with Tropical Storm Irene, other energy and infrastructure related questions that Brattleboro Climate Protection has also been present in conversations. And I think that as a result, Brattleboro has been able to, just give you a couple of quick examples, the Energy Committee has been sort of leading the charge, but with Paul Cameron's and Brattleboro Climate Protection's continued support to very quickly switch out old street lighting in favor of LED street lighting, save the town a lot of money, and also reduce the town's overall climate footprint. And something else, just given the industry I work in, which is solar development, I've seen around the state how solar siting and the whole issue of basically, how do we reuse our landscape as we move through this energy transition in many towns around the state has become a highly controversial and conflict-ridden subject. Here in Brattleboro, not everybody may be happy with the way things are going, but in general, the level of information, the level of civic engagement, the level of just general understanding in the population of what's going on in the world of solar and other kinds of energy has, I think, been pretty constructive. A lot of progress has been made, and I think once again, Brattleboro Climate Protection deserves a lot of the credit for that, just openness and general level of engagement.
Thank you. Ms. Burke.
I just want to lend my voice to support this article. I've known Paul Cameron and his work since 2002. He's done an amazing job for Brattleboro, raises his own salary. He does so much, and I think that we owe him a great deal, and I think he's saved the town a tremendous amount of money. So I just urge support of this article.
The question is, shall the town raise and appropriate a sum not to exceed $10,000 to assist in funding Brattleboro climate protection? Are you ready for that question? Let's see, Mr. Harvey? Oh, Mr. Bosworth. I think he had his hand up.
Yes, Michael Bosworth, District 1, also a chair of the Energy Committee. I'm not going to repeat what Ralph and Molly said, but I certainly agree. Paul's been a great resource and a great help to the Energy Committee. Also, just a little bit more clarification on the sort of relationship between Brattleboro Climate Protection and the Energy Committee. Through a nonprofit, Paul has also been able to apply for grant funds and successfully, and when he gets those, it's a help to the town and to the Energy Committee. So I think these are all good things, and I certainly very much support the passing of this article. Also wanted to take, just very briefly, while I have the floor on matters related to the Energy Committee, I hope most of you picked up on the back table a copy of this two-sided report, which is an update on the energy audits of Brattleboro's municipal buildings. It was this body, the town reps, that voted to put money into an energy efficiency fund, which has paid for this extensive study that has now delivered a wealth of useful detail and recommendations on how to go about tightening up our buildings while also saving money for the town. There may well be articles on the warning a year from now, we don't know yet, about how to fund some of these projects. We'll need to spend money to save money, but this gives us a real blueprint. So along with thanking the consultants, Margaret Dillon and Chris Hebb and the Wyndham Wood Heat Initiative, we should also thank, when you see them, members, especially of the subcommittee that worked on this. Includes, along with Paul, Tad Montgomery, Bob Reuter, and Lester Humphreys. So if you don't have a copy of this report, please pick one up. And if you have any questions about that, you can just ask me also during the break or others. Thank you. Bye-bye.
The question is, shall the town raise and appropriate a sum not to exceed $10,000 to assist in funding Brattleboro climate protection? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those, please rise. All those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you have adopted Article 15. As a program note, the check-in clerks have requested that all members please stay within the roped-in area when you're voting. They cannot keep track of members outside of the chain. So if we have any votes coming up, please make sure you're inside those chains. We now move to Article 16 to see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $120,000 to support human service programs and facilities for the residents of Brattleboro, to be allocated among service providers in the following manner. AIDS Project of Southern Vermont, $2,000. American Red Cross, New Hampshire and Vermont region, $5,000. Boys and Girls Club, $15,200. Brattleboro Area Adult Daycare Gathering Place, $2,000. Brattleboro Area Hospice, $1,200. Brattleboro Senior Meals, $7,000. Family Garden, $2,500. Green Mountain RSVP, $700. Groundworks Collaborative, $20,000. Kids Place, $4,000. Meeting Waters YMCA, $5,000. Senior Solutions, $2,800. Southeastern Vermont Community Action, SEVCA, $12,000. Turning Point, $7,000. Vermont Wilderness School, $4,000. Vermont Center for Independent Living, $1,600. Visiting Nurse and Hospice of Vermont, New Hampshire, $7,500. Wyndham Child Care Association, $5,500. Wyndham County Safe Place Child Advocacy Center and Southeastern Unit for Special Investigations, $1,500. Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union Summer Food Program, $6,000. And Youth Services Big Brother Big Sister, $7,500. The chair recognizes Ms. McCumber.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm going to take a deep breath and happily move the following. I move that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $120,000 to support human service programs and facilities for the residents of Brattleboro, to be allocated among service providers in the following manner. AIDS Project of Southern Vermont, $2,000. American Red Cross, New Hampshire and Vermont region, $5,000. Boys and Girls Club, $15,200. Brattleboro Area Adult Daycare Gathering Place, $2,000. Brattleboro Area Hospice, $1,200. Brattleboro Senior Meals, $7,000. Family Garden, $2,500. Green Mountain RSVP, $700. Groundworks Collaborative, $20,000. Kids Place, $4,000. Meeting Waters YMCA, $5,000. Senior Solutions, $2,800. Southeastern Vermont Community Action, Inc., SEVCA, $12,000. Turning Point, $7,000. Vermont Wilderness School, $4,000. Vermont Center for Independent Living, $1,600. Visiting Nurse and Hospice of Vermont and New Hampshire, $7,500. Wyndham Child Care Association, $5,500. Wyndham County Safe Place Child Advocacy Center and Southeastern Unit for Special Investigation, $1,500. Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union Summer Food Program, $6,000. Youth Services Big Brothers Big Sisters, $7,500.
Is there a second? Normally, the chair would read the entire thing. You've already heard it twice, so I'm going to say it has been moved and seconded as just read. Is there any debate? Yes, Ms. Stahl-Tyler.
So I've had some people in the town ask me, and I didn't know how to answer this question, so it's an interrogation to someone who may know the answer. I think all of these on the list are nonprofits. Yes. So the question that was asked is, if we as taxpayers ourselves already give of our own volition, why is it that our taxes that we would also be given to specific nonprofits? Why is money collected through taxes given to nonprofits? If someone could answer that, then I could pass that on.
Is there someone who would like to respond to the inquiry of Ms. Stahl-Tyler? Ms. McKinney.
Perhaps I actually should defer to a member of administration, and then I would like to speak in favor of the practice.
Okay, so you're not answering the question then?
I may not be the best one to provide that.
All right,
background.
then we will, Mr. Gartenstein, if he can respond to the question raised by Ms. Stahl-Tyler.
Vermont law authorizes human service organizations to seek financial support from towns, and historically, human service organizations would make their requests directly to town meeting, and I think it was 10 or 15 years ago that we made a decision here at town meeting to form a human services funding review committee that would take all of the requests coming from human services organizations for municipal funding, review them all, weigh them, and then make a group recommendation to town meeting for its consideration. So if you make your own contributions, as many of us do, to human services organizations, this is supplemental funding that comes from the municipality as authorized by Vermont law. No?
Okay, so now we'll take further debate or question from Ms. McKinney.
I'd like to speak in favor of this practice. I think that so many sources of governmental funding have been reduced for many of the nonprofits. It's quite a struggle, and most nonprofits have to spend a lot of time in fundraising, and I think that this practice of a small amount of support from the municipality is very important.
For the debate, Mr. Fallion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Fallion, District 3. I rise to support this motion. I can assure a lot of the new people here that the process by which this committee does its work is remarkable. I speak from someone who for years served on the committee. I think I served on it I began serving on it just after the town meeting decided that it would be better if there was a committee. An awful lot of work has gone into the process of deciding, establishing transparent criteria, having informational meetings for all intended recipients of grants to come and have their questions answered. 3 or 4 of those meetings take place early in the fall. There's a lot of back and forth communication that takes place. This is just to say that this money is very, very well monitored and supported. It's just the old days of just submitting an application and having it funded or not have ended years ago. And also, it's worth noting that other towns, many of these organizations provide services in other towns as well to members of those communities. And so these organizations are also going to town meetings in other towns in Windham County. And I would just end by publicly thanking the various members of this committee for all the hard work that they do, including Ann Fielder, Emil Coinheiser, Sarah Longsmith, Ellen Martin, Julie Peterson, and I believe the longest-serving member on the committee, David Miner. Thank you all.
Mr. Underhill.
Ben Underhill, District 1. I think to answer Ms. Dahl-Tyler's question too, is yes, these groups do ask other towns for money. It also looks good when they're going out to achieve grants that they've got the support of these towns, which is another reason why the town does this.
Ms. Turners.
Should know how to use this. Catherine Turners, District 3. As chair of the Brattleboro Senior Meals Board, we are very grateful for what the town gives us. I don't know if people are aware of the fact that 5 days a week we serve 80 meals to Meals on Wheels, people who cannot shop, are incapable of cooking. And we also serve at least between 40 and 60 meals 5 days a week to congregate for seniors. And in a perfect world, I would say, yes, it would be wonderful if everybody donated, and it would be just marvelous, but unfortunately, it's not a perfect world. And I would like to thank the town for the money that we get from them. We need it. Thank you.
Further debate on the human services. Mr. Agavi.
I support this because this is what we do as a town. I'd like to note in looking back, if you look at some of the old town reports from the 1920s and earlier, later, you will be aghast at how large of a percent of the town's budget went to the town farm that supported many of the poor, that went to the hospitals to cover the medical expenses of everybody in town who used the services that couldn't pay out of pocket. So in fact, what we contribute now is a pittance. This change, it started to change in the 50s, in the early 50s, maybe even 54 if anybody knows exactly. We stopped doing that because with unionization, many, many Americans and workers had health insurance elsewhere. But historically, we have always done everything we could to take care of everybody in our community that had needs.
Further debate on the human services proposal. Mr. Kasnet.
Daniel Kasnitz, District 1. While the legal term is indeed nonprofit, I suggest that this is quite a misnomer, that these organizations are in fact social profit organizations, and they deliver tremendous social profit. And I further suggest that social profit is actually more valuable than fiscal profit.
Further debate, Ms. Kornheiser.
Emily Kornheiser, District 1. I'm on the Human Services Committee, and I'd just like to speak to how very careful we are when we review proposals, as you'll see on page 12. We look at whether or not agencies are exempt from taxes, whether or not they require this operating funds in order to continue moving forward and serve the Brattleboro community. We look at the number of Brattleboro citizens that they serve in relation to other members in the county or the state. And we look at whether or not they actually have the capacity to seek much larger grants outside. And in the last 5 years, we've really narrowed our parameters that way, to really only fund those agencies that absolutely require the support of Brattleboro citizens and serve Brattleboro citizens. Thank you.
Mr. Schiff.
Leo Schiff, District 3. I'd like to interrogate a member of the Human Services Committee on the new inclusion of the Vermont Wilderness School.
Ms. Kornheiser was just standing there, so maybe she would be willing to respond to your question, Mr. Schiff.
It's actually fairly rare that new organizations apply for funds from the Human Services Committee. And in the last few years, I think, as a state, we've acknowledged the child care crisis for many families, specifically the child care crisis in summers for parents of school-aged children. And the few camps and daycares available to kids that are school-age in our community for parents to work. Vermont Wilderness School has really been trying to make the transition to serving lower-income and middle-income families so that parents can work during the summers and so that those kids can be outside and really enjoy their summers.
Further debate on the Human Services article? If not, all those in favor of the motion as presented and written in your report, and as stated, without me having to state it all over again, please signify by standing. You may be seated. All those opposed to Article 16, please stand. And you have unanimously adopted Article 16. Article 17, to see if the town will authorize the expenditure of $25,000 from program income, a revolving loan fund that dispenses proceeds which originate as community development block grants as a contribution to the operation of Southeastern Vermont Economic Development Strategy, SEVEDS. Chair recognizes Mr. Scholes.
I move that the town authorize the Select Board to expend $25,000 from program income, a revolving loan fund that disperses proceeds which originated as community development block grants, as a contribution to the operation of Southeastern Vermont Economic Development Strategies, SEVEDS.
Is there a second? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the town authorize the Select Board to expend $25,000 from program income, a revolving loan fund that dispenses proceeds which originated as community development block grants as a contribution to the operation of Southeastern Vermont Economic Development Strategy, SEVEDS. Is there debate? The chair recognizes Mr. Stevens.
Bob Stevens, District 2. I'm also the chair of the SEVEDS board currently and would like to speak in favor of this motion and perhaps give a little background on what SEVEDS does. Not everyone may know that SEVEDS was formed about 10 years ago 9 years ago as a regional economic development group. It is a regional organization with members throughout Windham Region, Windham County. It spent several years identifying issues, assets, coming up with a strategy that was federally recognized, and is now working on implementation with a primary goal of trying to add jobs to this community. Jobs that pay better than median family wage to sort of contribute and add to the livability and see some economic growth. A quick summary of those programs that are currently underway. CEVED's actually had a steering committee for the Vermont Yankee closure that really led to the background and the negotiations of the $10 million grant fund that is now being used to support jobs in this county. It has currently received funding, is actively working on a green building cluster where we have a group of probably 30 people that are trying to figure out how to build jobs in that industry, and we anticipate hundreds of jobs that can be added in this region because of assets that exist here and in the surrounding region. A similar cluster analysis and working group for precision manufacturing, another initiative for what's called a business accelerator, where we identify and find businesses that are scalable and can grow, and then figure out how to bring resources so those jobs can come online faster. One of the other probably major initiatives of CEVED's is to try to find and build what we call workforce development. Many of our employers in this region would grow if they can find employees. So CEVED's has an active program that runs the gamut of the young professionals group to encourage young people to support systems and networking for young professionals, programs to introduce all our high school students to the jobs that are in this area, work fairs, programs with our major employers, a cluster of healthcare, the colleges, an intern program, and again, there's many more information that I can add, but I would like to speak in favor of this to continue what is really a long process, years, 10, 20-year process, to try to improve this economy and find jobs for folks that grow up here, and hopefully to help our grand list over time and reduce burden on our residential tax base. Thank you.
Further debate? Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Moderator. I'm Alyssa Todd from District 2, and I had a question for the administration and the Select Board. I understand from an article in the Reformer this week that the initial request from CEVED's was at $3 a person, and that the decision was made for the town of Brattleboro to only support at $2 a person, and I believe that's the reflected $25,000. I was curious about why that decision was made, especially given the information we were just given about CEVED's.
Is there a member of the Board of Select people who would be prepared to answer that? Mr. Gardenstein.
I can't speak for every member of the Select Board. I can speak for what I recall about the discussion at the meeting addressing that topic. I think what we've learned over the last decade, 2 decades, is that economic development really needs to happen regionally rather than focusing solely on individual towns. But there are countervailing issues that impact the town of Brattleboro's financing that at least led me to vote in favor of $2 rather than $3 a head financing. And I don't want to get off track and provide a lengthy explanation here, but in summary, the state of Vermont does not provide regional economic hubs with mechanisms to raise revenue in a way that allows us to defray our expenses such that real estate taxes are not disproportionately high. So we have to support, through our real estate taxes, the economic activity for the entire region, which is concentrated here in Brattleboro. And so we're already paying off of our real estate taxes to support economic activity here in town. And there are many ways in which the town already supports the regional economic activity that goes on here. And under the circumstances, we felt that it was appropriate to be funding the request at a somewhat lower level than had been made by CEVEDS in the first place.
Ms. Kornheiser.
I think the goal of regional economic stimulus is laudable, and a lot of the work of CEVEDS is as well. I would be curious, I also agree with the idea of us being a regional hub and funding ourselves as a regional hub and the tensions with that. And I know that CEVEDS has requested funds from other communities in the area, and I'd be curious to know about the breakdown of that money. So I'm interrogating someone from
Is
CEVEDS.
there someone, Mr. Stevens or otherwise, who can respond to the inquiry of Ms. Kornheiser? Mr. Stevens.
Bob Stevens, I believe I can answer that, and there's some others in the room that can be more accurate, but I think there were 9 communities that we were able to reach out to, get ballots on the town meeting this year at $3 a person. All communities except for Londonderry did support the effort and are contributing to CEVEDS. Londonderry had a parallel effort of economic development through Manchester, which is outside of our region, which is why they chose to not support the request. If you'd like, I can ask folks in the back to give more specifics on that.
Would you like more information, Ms. Kornheiser? Is there someone in the general audience that is able to provide us with greater detail? Yes, sir. There's a mic back there that you can use.
Hi, my name is Adam Grinold. I'm the Executive Director of the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, which manages the CEVEDS efforts. CEVEDS is an affiliate entity of the BDCC and as such contracts with the BDCC to implement its mission. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you here today. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the Select Board for your longstanding support and leadership with CEVEDS. If it weren't for the town of Brattleboro, the early days of CEVEDS would never have really gotten off the ground, and we've been able to grow the organization and the effort such that we're able to go out to the following municipalities and receive funding this year. Rockingham funded CEVEDS efforts for the $15,000. Town of Westminster was $9,534. Putney was $8,000. Vernon was $6,000. Wilmington was $5,000. Dover was $3,000. Marble was $3,000 for a total of $51,000, all which represent $3 per capita. Thank you.
Mr. Gartenstein.
I would also note that the source of these funds is from what we call program income. So the money that's being contributed to CEVEDS, if this article is adopted, isn't tacked onto the real estate tax rate. We get community development block grant funding, which comes from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, which comes to the state through block grants. We can sponsor applications for those funds from various community entities. After we loan those funds out, they repay us, and that money then goes into the program income fund, and we can make grants or loans out of that program income fund, and this is a grant that's being proposed with this article from the program income fund. Was that clear?
The question is, shall the town authorize the Select Board to expend $25,000 from program income, a revolving loan fund that disperses proceeds which were originated as community development block grants, as a contribution to the operation of Southeastern Vermont Economic Development Strategies, also known as CEVEDS? Are you ready for that question? Mr. Fallion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Fallion, District 3. could you, David, could you say some more about what plans, if any, specific plans this hub has in relation to other hubs in the state of Vermont? I mean, we're not the only one who has a problem being across the river from a tax-free state, being a town that supports many other towns. I'm thinking of maybe White River Junction, perhaps somewhere on the New York state line. Is there any organized effort on the part of these major big municipalities like Brattleboro to basically champion and advocate at the state level to solve this, to help us solve the problem? I mean, is there any plan to do that? You've spoken in the past at informational meetings about the disadvantages we're under. I wonder if there's any planning going on now or anticipated in the future to organize with other municipalities and bring some clout to Montpelier.
Mr. Gartenstein is interrogated.
We had a regional economic hub study group that worked for about a year. That group just finished its work, and the town manager is now actively working to reach out to representatives, town managers, mayors in other regional economic hubs that are similarly situated, with the goal of forming a coalition and working together to develop an agenda to try to seek some what I call fundamental taxing fairness for regional economic hubs like us. We will need support from our legislators, and it is our intention, among other things, to reach out to those legislators and to try to create an agenda to lead to some taxing fairness for the hubs as well. Our tax rate here, municipality, is like $1.17, and I have the data in front of me. Surrounding towns, including those that can use the local option sales tax, which we can't for fear of pushing business across the river, have tax rates, some of them in the 30, 40 cent on 100 range.
Further debate? Ms. Holloway.
I just want clarity before I decide what I'm gonna, how I'm gonna vote on this. But I'm just curious. So, is this program? How much is in program income currently? And I'm just thinking if it's not coming out of, it's kind of this pot of money, and maybe this is where I'm unclear. Why couldn't we do $3 per person if it's not going to increase taxes? If it could go to some organization that actually is working towards economic development when we are an economic hub. Thanks.
Is there a member of the administration, Mr. Elwell?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. There's just shy of $400,000 right now in the program income fund. I'm going to go out on a limb and give an impression, as Mr. Gartenstein did on behalf of his colleagues a few minutes ago, of what he remembers of the discussion at the Select Board. I'm going to describe a little bit more about what I remember about that discussion and ask that any of you speak up if you think I didn't get it right. There were two different factors, two additional factors beyond what Mr. Gartenstein spoke to earlier, that the board was considering that night in making this recommendation for $25,000 to this body. One is the level of funding responsibility that the town has taken on, town of Brattleboro has taken on behalf of the region for SEVEDS, and you heard Mr. Granold speak just a moment ago to the important role that Brattleboro played both in the trenches with SEVEDS in the early organizing of the effort, still leadership of the effort, but also in funding it. So there was a challenge grant early on of $25,000 by the town, where the town pledged that there would be $25,000 more from Brattleboro if that could be raised from other communities. It was, and Brattleboro paid $25,000 more. And since then, there have been additional contributions made by the town of Brattleboro during years when surrounding communities weren't contributing in the manner that they are this year. So there have been some other communities who have participated, but not to the degree that it's now being broadened. That was a factor that was considered, that level of overall funding to the effort during its life over this last decade or so that has come from the town. And a second factor, very specific to the point that you made or the question that you asked about how much money is in the fund. There is about $400,000 there now, but that fund serves for, it serves the purpose of direct support in the form of loans and grants to economic development projects in town and housing-related projects in town. And so there are other particular needs that we have that we need to draw on that fund. We wouldn't want to get it down to a level where we had a really good project come along and insufficient funds and program income to be able to support it. And so there was a concern that a higher level of support from program income at this time for the ongoing general effort that SEVEDS represents, would be an additional $12,000 or $13,000 less that we would have available to give to those specific projects.
Could I ask one more question to that? How much has been used in the past? Like, what's the average being used, or what was used in the last year, just to see if that is actually, are you denying people because of not having enough, or is there actually a surplus of, funds available that aren't being accessed?
We have not denied an application during the past year. The most significant expenditure from program income this past year was a $200,000 commitment to the GS Precision project, and there have been a variety of grants and loans made, and I'm sorry that I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head, but relatively smaller amounts have been devoted as matching money to CDBG grant applications and loan applications that have been filed by economic development proposers and by proposers of housing projects in the town. So I don't know if John has a figure that we could state as to what the total of those smaller grants is on top of the $200,000 for GS. Okay. Yeah, we don't have an exact figure for you right handy. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Scholes.
A couple more points on what Peter just said. Initially, when SEVEDS came to us, we asked them to go out and visit the other towns and see if they got support from them, and if they did, then we would support this. So, as has been said, we really were a pretty important factor in this getting off the ground. The block grants, there's also, I don't know if it's $100,000 or $200,000 that went to the Brooks House project as well, and the Hermit Thrush Brewery is another example of the kind of the places we've given the money to. We just raised the minimum from the maximum from $40,000 to $70,000, so we have enough for about 5 grants until next year when we get about $80,000 back in. And the idea with this fund is to loan money out and then get it back and use it again. And when we make grants rather than loans, we don't get that money back. So we're trying to pass some of the responsibility on to the rest of the economic region, and at the same time, this is our economic development tool. This is the one thing we have that we can actually give businesses that want to expand or entrepreneurs that have a good idea that want to explore it and create a business. So it's important to keep an eye on it.
Further debate. The question is, shall the town authorize the Selectboard to expend $25,000 from program income, a revolving loan fund that dispenses proceeds which originated as community development block grants as a contribution to the operation of the Southeastern Vermont Economic Development Strategy, SEVEDS? Are you ready for that vote? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. You may be seated. And you have approved and adopted Article 17. Article 18, to see if the town will appropriate $449,225 from the unassigned general fund balance as of June 30th, 2015, to fund the following: $150,000 for the Bonneville Road retaining wall, $165,000 for the repair and refurbishment of the swimming pool at Living Memorial Park, and $134,225 to reduce the tax levy for fiscal year 2017. The chair recognizes Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town appropriate $449,225 from the unassigned general fund balance as of June 30th, 2015 to fund the following: $150,000 for the Bonneville Road retaining wall, $165,000 for the repair and refurbishment of the swimming pool at Living Memorial Park, and $134,225 to reduce the tax levy for fiscal year 2017. And I believe Mr. Gardenstein would like to speak to the article.
First of all, is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the town appropriate $449,225 from the unassigned general fund balance as of June 30th, 2015 to the following, to fund the following: $150,000 for the Bonneville Road retaining wall, $165,000 for the repair and refurbishment of the swimming pool at Living Memorial Park, and $134,225 to reduce the tax levy for fiscal year 2017. And the chair does recognize Mr. Gardenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This article is presented in conjunction with the next article, which is the budget question for the town as a whole. I'll speak to the overall issues relating to the budget after this article and when Article 19 is taken up. But I'll just speak very specifically now about the fund balance and our recommendations for how to use it and how to protect it. At the end of June 30, 2015 fiscal year, we had $2,136,744 in fund balance. That's on page 66 of your orange book. And we have a guideline in place, which is to keep 10% of that money for emergency purposes, so that we have 10% of the total town budget in the fund for emergency purposes. So our goal is to keep about $1,620,000 in the bank account for emergencies. And we have at this point about $583,454 in excess of that 10% guideline currently in the fund balance. One of the major changes in the way we're dealing with the budget this year is that we're trying to pay for capital expenses that are recurring and that should be paid out of the operating budget, because they're really operating expenses, that we're paying for them out of real estate taxes. But as to expenses that are more in the nature of one-time repairs, theoretically, paying for those out of surplus is an appropriate way to use surplus. And so there are two projects that fit that bill this year, one of them being the Bonneville Road retaining wall, and one of them being the first phase of repair and refurbishment of the Living Memorial Park swimming pool. So that's $315,000 that we're recommending to town meeting to pay for big ticket items out of surplus. We still hope to raise money and get funding from other sources for those projects. We will look for funding, for example, from the state's what's it called, project fund, in order to pay for the structures grant, the state structures grant program to help pay for the retaining wall at Bonneville Road. But right now, we need the funding, $315,000 for those two projects. That leaves still a significant chunk of money above the 10% guideline in the fund balance. And we deliberated long and hard about whether we should expend part, all, or none of that money, or recommend expending part, all, or none of that money this year to help defray general taxes. And we decided as a select board, as a group, to recommend spending half of the excess money over the 10% guideline this year, because we've got an increase in real estate taxes that's expected to happen because of the additional borrowing for the police fire facility renovation work. And we wanted to smooth out the tax increases as the borrowing and repayment ramps up over the next years. So we recommend spending half of the excess money to lower taxes this year. And then we should have next year another $134,000 from fund balance in order to defray taxes when we get to the highest repayment year on the second level of borrowing that we're doing for the police fire facilities renovation. So the recommendation at this point is to spend $449, 2 1/4 out of the unassigned general fund balance for those two big projects, and then to reduce the tax levy as the rate goes up to pay for police firework.
Is there further debate on Article 18? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Melton.
Paula Melton, District 1. I just have a question about a project that's not listed in the capital expenditures this year, which is the Elliott Street Bridge, which we authorized yet last year. And so I wanted an update on that and where it's being dealt with in the budget.
Mr. Gartenstein.
The state of Vermont, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Gartenstein.
The state of Vermont swooped in and said they were going to replace that bridge for us at very little expense to us. Starting July 1. So they've got an emergency bridge deck replacement fund. And we've approved the work, and we have like a 5% match maybe? That's right. 5% match. So the funding that we allocated last year for the Elliott Street Bridge from the fund balance may be available for other projects, because I think the language we used last year was broad enough to allow us to use that fund balance for other necessary projects. For example, I think some of the work at the municipal center may be covered by those expenses. Yeah. If I can defer to Mr. Elwell.
Yes, Mr. Elwell is interrogated further.
Thank you. Yeah, to clarify on the use of the funds, there were $485,000 that this body authorized a year ago under a very similar article to Article 18, and the four potential projects that were identified as uses for those funds were the improvement at the top of Union Hill where Union Street and Western Avenue connect, the Green Street retaining wall replacement project, the life safety improvements at the Municipal Center, and the Elliott Street Bridge. Because our funding requirement is so small for Elliott Street Bridge, because we were able to accomplish the Union Hill Western Avenue improvement at a significantly lower cost using town funds and a couple of subcontracts instead of a large general contractor there, and because the retaining wall project at Green Street received a $300,000 grant from the state as an urgent need project to protect that street and protect particularly Harmony Lot below. The sum total of doing those other three projects in those ways has left the lion's share of the money you authorized last year to be applied to the life safety improvements at the Municipal Center.
The question is, shall the town appropriate $449,225 from the unassigned general fund balance as of June 30th, 2015 to fund the following: $150,000 for Bonneville Road retaining wall, $165,000 for the repair and refurbishment of the swimming pool at Living Memorial Park, and $134,225 to reduce the tax levy for fiscal year 2017. Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. And you have unanimously approved Article 18. We now turn to Article 19. And I will only read this once. To see how much money the town will raise and expend to defray its expenses and liabilities. and the chair recognizes Mr. Gartenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the Select Board be authorized to raise, appropriate, and expend the sum not to exceed $16,288,258 in order to defray to that extent all general fund expenses for the period July 1, 2016 through June 30, 2017, including all highway and Windham County taxes, and that the Select Board be authorized to expend, in addition, any sum authorized for special purpose under any article contained in the warning for this meeting or any special representative town meeting. This motion includes the following funding sources: $449,225 to be appropriated from the unassigned general fund balance as just approved, $13,861,274 to be collected in property taxes, and the balance to be comprised of all other sources of revenue collected by the town. This motion also provides that the town taxes assessed on the grand list as of April 1, 2016 shall be due and payable in 4 equal installments payable to the town treasurer until overdue, then to the collector of taxes, that such payment of the installments shall be made on or before 5 p.m. on August 15, 2016, November 15, 2016, February 15, 2017, and May 15, 2017, and that interest at the rate of 1% per month be charged from the due date of payment on any overdue payment of the town tax installment or portion thereof, and that a penalty of 8% be charged on any overdue payment that remains due and owing on May 15, 2017. And if I could speak to the article, please.
First, is there a second? It has been moved and seconded as just stated by Mr. Gartenstein, and so at this point I will spare you the reread of it at this moment and would recognize to begin debate on this topic, Mr. Gartenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The $16,288,258 budget covers all expenses in Brattleboro's general fund, including expenses that have been authorized thus far in town meeting for this coming fiscal year, if approved. The budget provides for level service last year or this current year to next year. There have been some changes in the way in which we are approaching expenses. For example, at the recommendation of the town manager, rather than engaging in long-term borrowing for purchases that really relate to our operation of the town on an ongoing basis, we are paying for those and recommending that we pay for those expenses out of real estate taxes and levies in an annual basis rather than long-term borrowing. So during this transition year, you will see that we still have solid debt payments in the budget, and we're also raising money through taxes to pay for many of our capital expenses, including vehicles. Our ability to present this budget without a significant tax increase while making this change is due in large part to very solid work by the administration and our town manager, our department heads, and our town employees, who we want to thank for their sound fiscal management. We have squeezed the budget this year just like we have in many, many prior years. And if you go through the various line items, you'll find that many of our expenses are essentially level from the current year to next year. The budget as presented today is somewhat more than was explained at the informational meeting 10 days ago, because last Saturday, the town voted 111 to 27 to authorize the police fire project to proceed with the Black Mountain Road alternative endorsed. And so we have included in the budget that's now presented for approval the borrowing or the repayment costs of $176,906, which is $0.015 on a tax rate per 100, increasing the $1.82 tax rate increase. I'm sorry, the 1.82 cent tax rate increase that otherwise would have been presented to you today. So it's a 3.32 cent total increase that's being recommended with the adoption of the $16,288,258 budget. The one other thing I will note is that the municipal tax makes up probably 40 to 45% of the total tax rate that you pay. School district comprises a more significant part of your total tax rate per $100. Big part of the school tax rate is controlled by state taxing structures, but it is my general understanding that if the school budget is approved as presented, we anticipate preliminarily a substantial decrease in the total tax rate of maybe over 8 cents on 100. And so it's a very good year, actually, to be beginning the police fire project, because even with the increased funding for the police fire borrowing, we may see a good total tax decrease this year.
The question is on the town budget, Article 19. Is there further debate? Mr. Phillips.
Steve Phillips, District 3. I know that the Select Board had some debate about the wisdom or lack thereof on the plan for the Central Fire Station, whether to provide for future expansion to add the floor. And I'm just wondering if the Select Board could answer the question, what would it take for this year's budget, if an amendment were offered, to create the possibility for the infrastructure or the superstructure to have that be an option in the future? I'm not saying to build it all out, because I know that would be a big ticket item, but just to brace and build so that that could be done. And the second part of the question is, if that amendment's not made, is there a possibility that the Select Board could seek savings in other aspects of the project in order to maybe do that anyway? Thank you.
A member of the administration is interrogated by Mr. Phillips. Mr. Gartenstein.
I'll provide the information while noting that I'm not in favor of proceeding that way. I believe the cost to include the structural support for the third floor, for a third floor at Central Fire is about $170,000. I mean, I have the police fire folder here, but it's not right at my fingertips. It's about $170,000. And I believe generally that the cost of additional borrowing this year to support that would be about $4,000. It's up to the moderator.
Question number 2, I believe, was can the administration or the board find the tell me if I'm expressing this correctly, Mr. Phillips, but find the requisite sum of money buried somewhere in their existing budget without having to increase it?
The $4,000 is something that may be capable of being located without too much trouble. Adding $170,000 to the police fire project as a whole is a much more difficult proposition.
Further debate with regard to Article 19. Are you ready for the question? Mr. Dimes.
Kurt Dimes, District 2. I move to reduce the budget by $176,906.34, making the total $15,934,445.66. And I would like to briefly interrogate Mr. Chief Bukasi and speak to the motion as an amendment.
I will allow you to do that, Mr. Dimes, but first I'm going to have a second. But I also want to get one thing clear, and I thank you for giving me this in advance. In adding the numbers, the $176,906.34 obviously represents a number that is equivalent to the this year's
The debt service.
Debt service for the fire police for this year.
Yes.
However, you've done some math and given a total, and you say the total is 15. Then when you reduce that, you come up with $15,934,445. And I believe that what you may intend to do, and I just want to make sure we're correct here, is to start with the total amount of the budget, which as presented by Mr. Gartenstein was $16,288,258. You would then, I just want to make sure I understand you, you would then want to reduce that $16,288,258 by the $176,906. Is that correct, Mr. Dimes?
Yes.
All right. Then just...
Was I maybe starting with the unamended budget figure?
Yes, and so therefore, just so that we all are on the same page and we understand what you're trying to accomplish, I believe it would read, I move to reduce the budget by $176,906.34, making the total $16,111,351.66. Somebody can check my math, or you can, but I think that's what you're trying to accomplish. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes,
All
sir.
right. Okay. Is there a second to Mr. Dimes's motion? There is a second to the motion. So Mr. Dimes has moved to amend the budget effectively by reducing the budget by $176,906.34. Mr. Dimes, that has been seconded, and you have requested an opportunity to speak on your motion, and you may do so.
Thank you. I'd like to just briefly interrogate Chief Bukasi.
Chief Bukasi is interrogated should he choose to be.
Hello, Chief.
How are you?
Some time ago, I asked you for documents on the fire stats, and I believe they indicate there that the the fire department is doing an excellent job in reducing the amount of fire calls which occur. I would hope you just briefly confirm that the fire calls are down from the period from around 1989 to 2013, down by around 40%.
Mr. Moderator, if I could, I do have information on that question, and it's not as simple as answering what he's asking, if I may, the whole story.
You may elaborate, Mr. Bukasi.
Thank you.
Chief Bukasi.
So Mr. Dimes did ask for information on fire calls that Brattleboro does, along with some other information. One of the things that I do want to point out, he asked for information between 1998 and 2012. In 1998, we did do 470, what he's referring to as fire calls. And in 2012, we did a total of 270 of what he refers to as fire calls. So you do see a reduction of almost 200 calls of what he's referring to as fire calls. But what he did too was he made single-year comparisons. He did not include any of the information between 1998 and 2012. So for 23 years, he used none of the information. So what I'd like to explain is that on average over the last 27 years, we've done 403, just over 403, again, what he's referring to as fire calls, with a high in 1994 being 545 and the low of 249 in 2012. Over those 27 years, we've had a steady increase in total calls, total requests for assistance, with the high being 2,440 in 2011 and 935 being the low in 1992. So there is a slight drop in what he's referring to as fire calls. But one of the things that I'd like to point out to all of you, that I like to think that on the local level, what's contributed to this is a very aggressive fire prevention program and an inspection program, which includes pushing and making very aware for our residents of early warning devices such as heat and smoke detectors, as well as which does help with early notification, so residents react quicker. Sometimes we don't even know and don't get notified of a fire because of this early warning, and they actually take care of the issues themselves. And fires are much smaller today due to quicker responses and the advancements in our equipment, such as bunker gear, air packs, and thermal imaging cameras. The other thing that I'd like to add is that Mr. Dimes refers to a 40% increase in staffing nationwide. I want to point out that Brattleboro has no increase in staffing over the last 38 years, which is my time of employment here in Brattleboro. And actually, our career staff is one less today than it was when I started. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I would have pointed out myself that Brattleboro proudly bucks the trend of increasing firemen employment. It has been constant over the last 25 years, although nationally the trend is for firemen's career positions to be increased by 40%. The blue line indicates, these are documents of the National Fire Protection Association. And as Chief Bukasi says, their success has depended on things like construction codes, fire alarms, public education.
Point of order, Mr. Franks. Just
Tom Franks, District 3. I'd like to see, I don't understand how this is germane to the motion on the board.
Mr. Gartenstein was...
Just a minute, Mr. Dimes. The point of order is directed to the moderator. Mr. Franks, Mr. Dimes has offered an amendment which is proposing a reduction in the total budget in a certain sum, $176,906. And I think that he does have the right to speak to his rationale and his reasoning for why you as a body should consider that reduction. And for that reason, I'm going to let him proceed as long as he is cognizant of the fact that it must be germane to the budget, and he's cognizant to the fact that we are all respecting each other's by trying to keep our speeches down to 2 or 3 minutes at the longest. Okay?
Thank you. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah. The practice of the fire department has not involved historically large conflagrations. Nowadays, the fire department is protecting people by education. Fire codes and so forth, and less smoking have meant that blazes are smaller, very often extinguished by sprinkler systems and so forth before the arrival of the fire department. And so the project as we have now, which prepares for a larger station to accommodate larger engines, is an outdated proposal. We need to concentrate more on education and those strong points which the fire department has shown so well over the past couple of decades. The project, the police fire project in general, then, seems to be proposing what would be for the Navy like more battleships. The battleship is obsolete, and this project is obsolete. Not only that, but it has gotten off on the wrong start right from the beginning. Right from the beginning, there were no considerations of other ways of fixing perceived problems. I mean, the narrow stairway, the mold, and so forth. This is a copy of the very first Police Fire Study Committee, the initial meeting. On its agenda, there is nothing but building-related matters. There was, unfortunately, because of a political climate or other reasons, a foregone conclusion that construction was the only option. And here is a list of the options that they'd considered besides building. That is a list of the things they considered besides building. Here is a memorandum from the town town manager referring to the project which we say has come down in cost. It's common knowledge, but actually incorrect, that the project has been reduced in cost. It was, in previous to December 12, 2000, $9,802,000. It has nearly doubled. This is just a little sample of the things that people might have considered had they the chance. $1,600 for supplemental restraint for arrestees. This was recommended to me by a former employee of Brattleboro Emergency Services.
Okay, just a second. You've got a point of order. Who raised the point of order? Mr. Kasnet.
I suggest that the 2 minutes has been significantly.
Yes.
I suggest both that the 2 minutes has been significantly passed and that also these particular displays do not in any way speak to the direct amendment itself. They do not seem to be germane to the modification of the motion. Thank you.
Mr. Dimes, Mr. Kasnet raises a valid issue. And
I can clarify the relation.
Well, again, we've agreed that we will take no longer than 2 or 3 minutes. I have no problem with you making your presentation, but in fairness and out of respect to all of the other members, again, I asked you to limit it to that, and it does have to be germane to the budget. We've already voted the project. It has to be based upon the budget. Now, one thing I should point out, and I believe I've already told you this, that you can seek to reduce the budget in any sum that you wish to. However, you cannot direct the Select Board where to apply that reduction.
Right.
That is because the charter gives the Select Board general oversight of the affairs of the community, and they get to decide. And any kind of reduction would only be advisory. Now, I'll give you another minute to just wrap up your argument, okay?
Thank you. As I said, there was a foregone conclusion going into the very first meeting. Also, the Select Board has misinformed us on more than one occasion, virtually censoring the news that the funding is not absolute. That is, as I informed the Select Board over 2 years ago on more than one occasion, that the funds can be directed to other capital expenses. But they denied this, and they censored my saying so at the budget reconsideration meetings in 2014. Here's a letter from Mr. Giuliani, who is the our bond counsel. It says, quote, "The general statute provides that the electorate may authorize the expenditure of the proceeds or portion thereof for any purpose or purposes for which bonds are issued." I also have a note from the director of the bond bank. The Vermont Bond Bank executive director says that those funds can be redirected. And thank you very much.
Okay. The question is on Mr. Dimes' motion to amend the budget by reducing the budget by $176,906.34, making the total $16,111,351.61. Mr. Wheelock.
Marshall Wheelock, District 2. I would like to point out that one of the facts Mr. Dimes has just shared with us is the fact that we, in 2010, or 2000 it was, considered constructing entirely new police station and fire station combined, and the total bill was just about $10 million. 16 years later, that bill for remodeling the two buildings has grown to somewhere in the $14, $15 million area. The need is there, the need will be there. I don't see the economy going into a deflation mode anytime in the future, so the longer we put it off, the more it's going to cost us.
The question is on the Dimes motion to amend. The chair will recognize Mr. Scholes.
I would like to call the question on the motion.
There has been a motion made and seconded to call the question, which requires a 2/3 vote. So the chair will put that question to you now. All those who are in favor of ceasing debate on Mr. Dimes's motion to amend, please rise. You may be seated. All those who are opposed to ceasing debate on Mr. Dimes's motion, please rise. The 2/3 requisite vote appears to have been met. It has been met, and you have ceased debate on the Dimes motion. So we return to the motion for your consideration. And the question will be, shall the budget be reduced by $176,906.34, making the total $111,351.66. All those in favor of Mr. Dimes's motion as just read, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. You may be seated. And Mr. Dimes's motion is defeated. We return to Article 19. Shall the Select Board be authorized to raise, appropriate, and expend a sum not to exceed $16,288,258 in order to defray to that extent all general fund expenses for the period July 1, 2016 through June 30th, 2017, including all highway and Windham County taxes, and that the Select Board be authorized to expend in addition any sum authorized for special purposes under any article contained in the warning for this meeting or any representative town meeting. This motion includes the following funding sources: $449,225 to be appropriated from the unassigned general fund balance, $13,861,274 to be collected in property taxes, and the balance to be comprised of all other sources of revenues collected by the town. This motion also provides that the town tax assessed on the grand list as of April 1st, 2016 shall be due and payable in 4 equal installments, payable to the town treasurer until overdue, then to the collector of taxes, that such payment of installments shall be made on or before 5 p.m. on August 15th, 2016, November 15th, 2016, February 15, 2017, and May 15, 2017, and that interest at a rate of 1% per month be charged from the due date of payment on any overdue payment of the town tax, installment or portion thereof, and that a penalty of 8% be charged on any overdue payment that remains due and owing on May 15th, 2017. Are you ready for that question? If so, Mr. Agave.
The one part of this that's absent, if you look in your town reports, there is no information on the other part of town. I think when you all think about it, how many people are living in Tri-Park, Ledgewood, Moorcourt, Westgate, Melrose, and many other places that are not even in those types of housing. It's a pretty large part of our town's population. And when I sit here and I vote on a budget that I can afford with no problem right now, I got lucky this year, but I have to ask myself, what is my responsibility to the rest of my community? And we don't get any information in this report about how the rest of that community is doing. We close our eyes, we pretend we have them out of sight. Literally, look at where these places are. Talk about pushing your poor out of sight and never thinking about them. Until we say they aren't rioting in the streets, so everything must be okay. And I won't say more than that, except that I'm very disappointed that I'm in a position where I cannot take into consideration a very large part of my community because I know nothing about their circumstances.
Are you ready for the question? Mr. Siegel.
Hi, I'm Siegel, District 3. I just wanted to ask, I don't even know who to ask this of. There is, I know, a petition out there to have the article from last weekend, from last Saturday, put to the town for a referendum that would be a binding referendum. Now, if that petition were to succeed, and there were to be a binding referendum, and the article from last weekend were then to not be passed, voted no on, what happens to the money that we're allocating or considering in this budget for repayment of the loan?
A member of the administration is interrogated. Mr. Elwell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. If a sufficient number of signatures are gathered and there is a townwide referendum, and if at the townwide referendum your decision of last Saturday is overturned, then the town would not have any authority to issue the debt in order to proceed with the Black Mountain Road project.
So the money in the budget would just sit there and wait for next year?
I'm sorry?
The money in the budget would then just sit there and wait for next year?
There would have to be further consideration first by the select board and ultimately by town meeting to decide how to proceed, unless the select board, the one option the select board would have for proceeding with the overall project of the combined three elements of Central Fire, West Brattleboro Fire, and the police station would be to travel under the existing authorization from your 2012 action that allowed the police station to be upgraded, renovated and have an addition put on at the municipal center. That authority still stands. The funding that has been identified as the first year cost of debt service for the municipal center alternative, for the Black Mountain Road alternative that's been put into this proposed budget before you today is less than what would have been required had you decided instead to stay with the plan to go to the municipal center. So further action would have to be taken by the select board and most likely would have to be taken by this body before we could proceed.
I'm looking forward to another meeting. Okay, thank you.
Further debate. Mr. Kuhn-Schmidt.
Hello, Eric. Are we on? Hello. Eric Schmidt, District 1. Just to provide some numbers, what Spoon was saying about we don't know what that portion of town looks like. As somebody who kind of came from that world into now being able to afford things and not have to just make do, my impression is people who have never been in that place have no clue what it's like. You have no clue, do I fix this? Do I go without? Do I replace it? Boy, replacing it would be really nice if I had the money. Okay, so here's some back of the napkin math on some of the numbers for town, and if somebody has more accurate numbers, please toss them up here. The median income for Brattleboro for an individual is $32,000. The median household income is about $44,500. So household means everybody within your family or household who's making money. The federal poverty line, again, somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, for one parent and one child, so a household of two, is about $16,000. For a family of four, it's $24,000 and change. From my understanding of the school board, the meeting about the school board, the school budget earlier this week, they say 62% of the children in this town in the elementary level qualify for free or reduced lunches. 62%. Okay, so that's a majority. To qualify for free or reduced lunches, you are either at, below, or up to 185% of the poverty line, representing for a parent and child an income of $30,000 a year. So from that, my back of the napkin math is 62% of the children in our elementary school system, their family makes $30,000 a year or less, okay? This body, to me, obviously represents the higher income portion of town overly much and does not well represent, and is underrepresentative of the lower income portion of town. Now, the reason I did not support Mr. Dimes' amendment is because I am not opposed to the police and fire project in principle. If we need it, we need it. The town has apparently decided, through many meetings before I got here, that we'd rather replace the car rather than keep throwing money into fixing it. That is just, it's time. If that's a decision, okay. Can we afford it? That's another question. And I would ask us, as a town, as this body, and the select board, it's gonna hurt. Stuff broke, everybody else in this town making, not very much money. When something breaks, you need to decide, all right, this needs to get fixed. What am I gonna give up to do it? Because you can't go get, well, many of us have second jobs, if you're lucky to have one in the first place. But at some point, you just can't keep growing money. At some point, it can't be addressed from the revenue side, it has to be addressed from the cost side. So I'm gonna vote against this budget, not because I'm against the police and fire project, but merely because I wanna see the costs of it offset from somewhere else in the budget. And it's gonna hurt. But everybody in town, I shouldn't say everybody, many in town are already hurting. The tax rate has been going up and up and up. The school board is going to be giving us a tax reduction this year. Great. Let's not fill that gap by raising the municipal rate. Let's take this opportunity to get the tax rate back down to where it can and should be a more sustainable level. Because also, my last point, the way the state calculates property tax adjustments, the refund, the low-income subsidy, it is more generous on the school side of things. The cutoff, I think, is something in the $90,000. Anything below that, you get some help. On the municipal side, you have to be making less than $47,000 of your household, not just an individual. And if you have your friend or relative come move in with you to help pay for things, their income counts towards that. So by raising the municipal rate and lowering the school rate, that will affect the low-income population of this town more harshly. So, thank you.
Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm closing in on 80, and so maybe I'm old-fashioned or I'm missing here, but I just want to make only 2 points in all this. We've got a lot of good information the gentleman there brought for us. I think most people in this country, most people at this town meeting are aware of the huge economic disparities that are present in our society. And so I think that's a given. I think most of the people around this room actually understand it. Some of them actually feel it, even though they aren't in the situation as described for people in trouble. So I think it's a little presumptuous to assume that for some reason or other, that somehow people in the lower income, more desperate phases of life aren't interested in municipal services. I can see people with poor housing, low income, or what have you, saying that service is good. I want the fire department and the police department to be able to respond to my needs. I'm willing to support that. I think it's unfair to assume that somehow people below a certain level of income don't want these services. They may want to pay for them more than more wealthy people who just don't care about taxes. So I'm just suggesting to the community, and this amendment in particular, that we have a level of services that seem affordable, that we can afford, and I have a feeling that many people who aren't here also want these services themselves.
Ms. Miller.
So how many signatures from the body of the town reps would we need on the petition to get this back for a town-wide vote by the voters?
When you say this, you mean
There's a petition circulating
Okay.
for, to recall, I don't know if you want to say recall, but have the town voters vote on it as opposed to the town reps. I don't know whether it would be binding or non-binding, but we'd at least get a better sense of what people can afford on their tax bills.
Town manager is interrogated?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. There's two different thresholds. The threshold for if the signatures came from the members of representative town meeting would be 50 signatures. If the signatures came from all the registered voters throughout the community, it would be 5% of the total registered voters.
Which is what?
Which is just shy of 400. Perhaps the town clerk could give you an exact number.
So, well, that's close enough. I mean, I have the petition that Dora drew up, and she has the petition. I don't know who else has the petition, but if people want to see democracy at work, I hope they will see one or the other of us and sign the petition, because I think this is still an issue. I think this is not this is a homogeneous group, and it really doesn't represent all the voters and all the taxpayers in Brattleboro. We want our police station to be adequate for our police officers, but we don't need to move it away from downtown, away from the schools, away from the hospitals, away from the major residential areas, away from most of the banks and stores. We don't need to move it up and hide it off of Putney Road.
The question is on the budget. Ms. Melton.
Paula Melton, District 1. I sympathize with the idea that we need to think about the lower income and lower middle income people in our midst. Those people are on my mind pretty constantly since I'm related to some of them. I believe that there are mechanisms in place for people who are in affordable housing situations to give them tax relief. There are mechanisms in place to reduce the expenses of people who are in low-income housing. I think that the problem that we have is that we don't have enough of this type of housing for everyone who lives here. And if I thought that voting down the budget would solve that problem, I would do it. But it has nothing to do with the budget.
The question is on the budget. Is there further debate? Ms. Atkinson.
Margaret Atkinson, District 2. Usually I save this for the school side of the debate, but I'm not 80, but you can perhaps listen to me either. There is always a lot of concern for people's ability to pay for things. I think that that's on everyone's mind who signs up for this. I think we also have to remember what government is for, and it's for providing things collectively that we can't provide individually. So when you propose to take one public good and the money that you need to spend on that public good, i.e. police and fire facilities, and then offset them with cutting other public goods, I don't know that we're going down the right track. Everybody benefits from the parks. Everybody benefits from the library. Everybody benefits from snow plowing and fixing bridges and roads. That's what government is for. I think that it is hard to understand the amount of work and care that goes into people considering all of those things and then presenting the work that's before us now. I would actually say that I think this is a very reasonable budget, and that people have for some years now with this huge project tried to balance that with the other needs of the town, and that folks have done a pretty good job at that, and that there's been much deliberation in many meetings on the impact of this. So I would ask that we pass this budget and get moving. Thanks.
Further discussion on the budget? Mr. Harvey.
I'm George Harvey, District 3, and I want to say that I'm a little bit miffed at the idea that we are a homogeneous group. It was not very many years ago when and I'm approaching 70 now, when I found myself as a town meeting rep wondering whether I should really give thought to being homeless instead of paying money for rent. My situation was that dire. Now, I've just said something that has nothing whatever to do with the budget of Brattleboro. And I wish everybody would just stop worrying about such things. We've got to worry about the budget on its merits and not on the basis of, if we want to talk about poor people, I think that's a great thing to talk about, but it's not the budget.
The question is, on Article 19, the budget. Is there further debate? Mr. McKinnon.
I apologize. This isn't completely directly connected to the budget. It is a matter about poor people. So much has been said about low-income households and the cost of police and fire. In representing the people who signed, my petition to get myself put on town representative meeting, half of them were on Valgar Street, where a large fire gutted an apartment, mostly populated by low-income people, and it was an arson. So it was a police and a fire matter. So as far as how much that affects people in low-income houses, that's how much it affected the people who I'm here representing. So that's all I have to say about that.
Further debate? Mr. Everingham.
Yeah, Bob Everingham, District 1. I'd actually interrogate Mr. Elwell. He made some comments last week about how tax increases are offset, and I think that'd be worth hearing again. Thank you.
Mr. Elwell is interrogated.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm digging for my notes from last week. I think I won't unless the body would like to hear the greater detail on it. I suspect maybe at this point in this particular conversation you don't. So let me answer generally that there is a state program that caps the amount of property taxes that are paid by people making up to, I believe this is where I would have referred to my notes. I believe it's $27,000 a year. I'm not certain of that. I spoke to it very specifically last week when you were making the decision about the project. But there is a quite low income level that's an absolute cap. And then up to $97,000 of household income a year, there is a level of tax relief that is not an absolute cap, but that does limit the amount of property taxes that are paid by such households, so long as they are owners of property and have registered those properties as a homestead, as their homestead. So I want to be clear that there are a lot of renters in the members, among the members of the community that the body's been having a conversation about in the last few minutes. There's a lot of renters and other people who may not qualify for this protection. But for those who are finding a way on a limited income to own a property and live in it here in our community, at the very lowest levels of income, there's absolute protection that they're paying as much taxes as they're going to be paying going forward, that both for the operating tax increase and the project-related tax increase, there will be no additional taxes paid by those households. And then up to $97,000 a year of household income, there will be some level of protection against paying additional taxes to the town. And the way that works is the state of Vermont, we assess taxes based on the total value of all the properties that are applicable or taxable. And then those particular owners of property, it's calculated as to what level of protection they get so that they pay the town less, and the state of Vermont pays us the balance of the value of that discount so that the community remains whole financially.
Question is on the budget. Ms. Holloway.
So, Peter, I remember it as being 47, and I know that was just reiterated from one of the other reps, not 27. And I think it was, I know that when we spoke about this, it was also 1/3 of anybody who was eligible for homestead. So it is a significant amount of our population that would not see an increase in their taxes. So I just want to show what I remembered. Thanks.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. That's right. It was 47, not 27. That's an important correction. And in addition to your point about the 1/3 who are eligible for the actual cap, it's actually more than half of the homesteaded properties that are eligible for some level of protection.
Ms. Todd. Or, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes, thank you.
Hi, Ronnie Byrne, District 3. I just want to make a point of clarification with regard to the income sensitivity on property taxes. The worksheet that the state uses to make the calculation for the rebate that goes back to the town is based on your prior year's income, not this year's, and also on your prior year's property tax bill. Another piece of information I'd like to add, and somebody please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. There were some statements made at the meeting where we were talking about the costs of the police and fire projects, and the overall increase to property tax on a average home in Brattleboro, say of $220,000 of assessed value, according to my calculation, would be $73.04 annually. Thank you.
Further debate. Mr. Davis.
Andrew Davis, District 3. I don't think our town budget is really the main driver of income disparity, nationally or locally. We have a very responsible budget here. The system has worked. We passed this initiative in 2013. It went back to the people at that point, and we moved forward with a more conservative option. And if we live in a very compassionate community and a very compassionate state, the number of helping organizations and departments of government in this state are impressive. They're administered through our school system, they're administered through our state and local governments. And if you're concerned about income disparity, the cost of health insurance, student debt, the need for public transportation, those are bigger, more national, regional issues, and they're not going to be dealt with here in our local budget. Let's pass this budget. Thank you.
The question is on Article 19, the budget. I will spare you listening to me read it again. Are you ready for that vote? If so, all those in favor, please rise. You may be seated. All those opposed, please rise. You may be seated. And you have adopted the budget article number 19. It is now 1:45, and the chair will, unless there is objection, call a recess at this point for 1 hour until 1:45. We'll see you all back then.